So I'm going to call the meeting to order. Let's see, Peter Morton.
Here.
Mary Foley.
Here.
Warren Brewster.
Here.
Sarah Creighton's here. Chris Olney.
Here.
And Sue Philbrick.
Here.
And Laura's on her way. That's 1, 2, 3, 6. Excellent. Okay, for anybody joining us online, I can see myself up there. We are going to be oh, there we go. Continuing the continuing the public hearing for cell signaling. They have asked us to continue, and the reason is that we're still working through some existing conditions as they develop, do more investigation, and so it makes sense to take it as a package of conditions, and we don't really have anything new to add right now. So I'll take a motion to continue the cell signaling hearing at their request to Tuesday, November 12th at 6:30 p.m.
So moved. A second, excuse me. Or both.
Motion, second.
A lot of press.
Okay, roll call vote. Sue Philbrick. She's got her hand.
Yes.
Do you have your hand raised?
No. Should
Oh,
it be?
you know, no, it's my cursor turned into a hand. Sorry. Technology.
Yes.
Peter, Mary?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
I vote yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So we're going to have a public hearing tonight. I know that there was a typo on the agenda. It is Monday, and that went out in the public notice, and town council has said no problem with us meeting tonight for that purpose. I think we can also take approval of the minutes, which are October 15th. If people had a chance to look at those. Okay, take a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay,
sorry.
and any discussion? Mary was absent, I believe.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what my email said today. I don't have the minutes in front of me. I've got a whole stack of papers at home. That I am part of that group, so I haven't been included in things. I was included in the first one and then haven't been included in meetings going forward. So if somebody can get me up to speed and start including me again, that would be nice.
So that's a separate matter than the motion to approve the minutes. So let's.
I'm just talking about the details.
Okay, then we can come back to that in a minute. All in favor of the minutes?
Aye.
Sue? Great,
Yes.
thank you. And one abstention. Great, and Laura is not here yet, so 2 abstentions. I'll come back to that issue, Mary, in a second. I also wanted to, is Shannon on yet?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay, great. Can you introduce Shannon?
So we have a new admin person who's going to be doing, working with the planning board as well as in the Conservation Commission right away. His name is Shannon Bianchi, and he is online right now. And eventually he'll do at least the zoning board moving forward, and then maybe some other committees and land use related tasks moving forward. We'd like to thank Gail for her many years of service to the planning board. And she will still be doing finance committee and many other tasks for the town as well. So
Great, thank you. Shannon, do you want to just say a word about yourself? Maybe if you can put your camera on, I can see your.
Sure, yeah, just 1 second. Hi, my name is Shannon Bianchi. I live in Nahant, actually serve on the Nahant Planning Board. Been on the board for quite a few years. Also am very dedicated to the open space effort out here on Nahant, and all things ecology. And I'm happy to join and help out for Manchester.
Great, thank you. And appreciate your being willing to jump in. We have lots of fun.
Yeah.
And I do want to echo Mark's comments. Gail jumped in. Was already doing a lot of other board minutes, and we were struggling with the new hybrid meeting format with a lot of challenges. I think that 1 year, I think we had 6 meetings we had to cancel because of that challenge, and she jumped in and helped right the ship and get our minutes done. And I know she's done a good job for a lot of other committees in town, so we appreciate her hard work and keeping us on track. And welcome, Shannon. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Madam Chairwoman. If I may just ask a favor for the first couple meetings, if people could announce their name as I'm taking the minutes now. Everyone's very new to me, and so if someone needs to make a motion or a second, that would be really helpful. Thanks.
Okay. No, good thought. So we'll try to all remember that. First of all, maybe we should we have Sue Philbrick. Wave your hands online.
Hello.
Peter Morton at the end of the table here. Mary Foley in black. Gordon Brewster.
Brewster name, well, I should turn to the camera.
And Sarah Creighton and Chris Olney. And then we have Laura Tenney will be coming shortly. Mark, Emily Ennis is consultant for the MBTA zoning. And we'll try to make sure that everybody who speaks announces themselves as well. Back to Mary's question. If you recall, Mary, Gordon, and I were going to go out to Atwater Avenue and look at sidewalk options, which we did. And then we were going to come back to the board with options. So we went out, we talked about it, we didn't come back with any recommendations, we sort of walked. Is that fair? I think that's what we did. Subsequently, as I explained last meeting, what I've come to realize is that the negotiations with cell signaling or the special permit collection of things with cell signaling is an integrated set of things, and of which Atwater Avenue is one. And so at last meeting, I proposed that Gordon, because of his construction background, and I meet with them to understand that collection with Town Mark and other staff like Chuck to understand the issues and then come back to the board with a recommendation. And so that's the work that we're doing. It's not it has to be done outside of a quorum. And so that's the work that we've been doing. I think that was the motion last time. It's a collection of items. So that was the rationale with Gordon with his construction experience. And
So I'd be happy to meet with you and fill you in kind of where we are with our.
Well, I just, again, being part of a subcommittee and then not being part, either
Well,
an
yes,
email would have been
There's
professional
going to be more meetings, so if you want to meet with me, we can go through what's been discussed and so that you can be available for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Fair to say, Mark, that no decisions have been made yet.
That's correct, none whatsoever.
and every single conversation starts with the planning board is the deciding
Yes.
the deciding body here, and we're just really gathering information. So, and understanding too, one of the issues is which are the planning board's jurisdiction and which are select board jurisdiction, because it turns out that they're intertwined.
Yes.
So we're trying to throw some over the wall. That's where that stands. Okay. Any other updates? on any issues?
Not at this point.
How about any reports from any committees besides MBTA task force? Downtown Improvement Committee, have they met?
Yeah, they met last week. Nothing substantive came out of it.
Just met?
Yeah, they met and talked about all the issues that they're continuing,
Okay.
substantive.
How about Finance Committee updates?
I'm not sure which meeting it was. I think since our last planning board meeting, Sarah Melish put together the MBTA financial analysis that we'll go over tonight, I guess. We just received that. The other FinCom members had not had an opportunity to review it, but it was passed through and so I mean, I have questions, but we'll go over that when we review it as a board.
It
Great.
was very interesting, if I may just offer.
Very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting, really well
Okay.
done.
Sue, any updates from the ZBA?
Not really. We did meet, just one property, nothing really noteworthy.
Okay. And any updates on the select board that you want to share?
So we're working on the warrant. There'd been some talk of trying to put together an ADU, which would have had to go through you, and decided it was not anywhere near time, bandwidth. And the chances that someone would, under the new ADU state law, that someone would announce that they had an ADU and that they were going to make it a short-term rental between February and April was slight, and that if a couple did get through, it would not be the end of it.
Okay. Another question, it's budgets, just anybody who just came in, we've continued the self-signaling public hearing until November 12th. It being budget season, did you submit a budget?
We
planning?
haven't submitted budgets yet. It's the only thing that was submitted, I believe, was capital budgets, and we didn't submit any capital.
Okay. We should put that on our agenda for the next meeting. So that both what we've spent this year and what we should have for next year. I mean, it goes through you, but I think the board has traditionally had input
Okay.
on that. So, any other, sorry to keep everybody in suspense, but we wanted to, the hearing is starting at 7 o'clock. Emily, is there any update from other towns that you can share with us?
Needham passed theirs last week. They had two different options for town meeting. One was a base compliance, and one was what they call the neighborhood plan, neighborhood housing plan, which went for a number above base compliance, and the neighborhood housing plan passed.
Is that a town meeting or representative?
That
town
is a
meeting?
town meeting. I believe that's a good question. Now that you've asked, I think it may be representative town, but I can check on that. Some of my others this fall are actually cities rather than towns, so they haven't gone forward yet. For people listening, cities have a different process for approving zoning ordinance in towns too, so it's a different timeline.
Okay.
And then other than that, the state EOHLC announced a bunch of updates, starting with October 1st. It's been roughly every week of the communities that are in compliance have been fully approved, and those that have submitted but are not yet approved. So that's still moving through. And as I said, there's, I think, the first batch on October 1st, and I think there have been maybe 4 since then.
And no one is out of compliance because the deadline is December 31st, is that correct? Or is-
For this year, there's actually 2 communities that are out of compliance right now. Milton is one of them because their deadline was December 31st, 2023. As you all may know, the town meeting passed the zoning bylaw, but there was a referendum, and before the end of 2023, but there was a referendum in January of last year, February of last year, sorry, that overturned that town meeting vote, so they are currently out of compliance. The town of Holden is out of compliance because it didn't submit an action plan, which was the first step. I believe their deadline is also December 31st of this year, so they have until then to come into compliance. And then for those of you who have been following, Milton and the state are currently in a legal disagreement, and the SJC heard arguments on October 7th so just earlier this month. I have not seen, I last checked at the end of last week, I haven't seen anything about when the updates are for next steps on that. But I have talked to a couple of town councils, everybody's sort of waiting.
But if I'm correct, the subject of the litigation was the applicability to Milton, not the legality of the law.
It's not the legality of the law. I did catch most of the arguments, and this will probably be the first of many times that I say I'm not a lawyer, because I'm not. But what was interesting as a non-lawyer was that the questions were mostly focused on the guidelines and whether they had the same status as regulations. That was a lot of them. There were other things that were discussed, but that was a big part of it. So, but it was not, there has not been a challenge to the law itself. That's correct.
Okay. All right, any other updates, things people want to talk about? Remind everybody that I did put something in the folder system called future meetings, as I said I would. I don't know if anybody's added anything to that document, but it is there in the SharePoint. So if you have ideas about things we should take up, feel free to do that. So we'll take a 10-minute recess, I think, and stretch our legs. There's no sense sitting in these chairs. Thank you, everybody online, for tuning in. And our hearing, the CST cell signaling hearing has been postponed to November 12th at 6:30 while they continue to do some investigation. And we will begin the public hearing on the zoning at 7. So, yes.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, actually, we should take any public comment
Okay.
as well. Thank you,
Stephanie
thank you
Rogers,
for.
59 Forest Street.
Yeah, sorry, can you just, we have a new admin person. So Stephanie Rogers, 59 4th Street. Thank you.
I was wondering if we, as the public, could get any color as to why cell signaling keeps getting on the schedule, on the agenda, and we keep coming so that we are aware of what's going on. And then they keep postponing. It seems like last minute because we're not given the word before we show up.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned, like, what is going on? Is there an issue going on?
Yep. Good question, and sorry that that for you that, and we should probably try to put that on the agenda sooner. There is nothing subversive going on. Basically, with a project of this size, as they and the issue around the road and utilities, negotiation, National Grid, those kinds of things, the things change. So there are 2 ways to do that. One is to have a special permit that's either 3 ways, I guess. Maybe, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. One would be a vague special permit. Another would be a special permit that gets amended. And the third is to try to get it right the first time. And so unfortunately, the special permit hearing process has to be continued to a certain date. We can't just say, we'll take it up when we're ready. We have to continue it to a date. And then when that date rolls around, we have to have the agreement of the applicant to continue it to a future date. So it's, I'm not aware that there are any catastrophes or unforeseen, site conditions or anything like that. And I would say that the base of the project is as we have heard it, we're simply trying to get the best deal for the town that we can.
Mhm.
Mark, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the utility issues, and as it relates to Atwater Ave, hadn't been fully vetted by CST prior to their submittal. So they were kind of doing it as they were going, trying to figure out what costs were, what's the best way of getting electric, communications, gas into the property, what the challenges were, what the costs related to that is, what the impact to Atwater Ave is, what the town may want. So they hadn't done any of that ahead of time. So during the process, these issues came up. They hadn't been worked out. They take longer. They have to study the condition of a culvert, for example. They have to do borings. So there's numerous things, and they are doing their homework. Just it takes time. So
Another example, just the public input asked for a bike lane, extended bike lane. So that requires an engineering look to see what would be involved, how is it even possible, is it, that's an example. So some of those things, obviously they didn't propose a bike lane and they're, so that kind of thing is going on.
So another question is, they already laid out, all the road blocks and the piping. And it was my understanding, I thought that the letter from the town was that it was gonna be done in October and November. I could be mistaken. Ending like around the end of November, early December. But it does seem like they're delayed in starting. And so I'm concerned with winter coming, what's going on? Like, I want to be able to plow my driveway.
Right. So you're talking about the water and sewer on Forest and Mill.
Yeah.
So maybe Greg might have some additional, that's not a planning board, that's outside of our jurisdiction. That's a town
Okay.
DPW, but I can
Gotcha.
understand why it's confusing, for sure.
I did get an email from the DPW. I had emailed Chuck Dam about that, and he had said that the water line work would be done in the fall, and the sewer line work would continue until spring. That's a little bit of dated information. I had asked him that about a month or so ago. That matters.
Yeah, so we share your desire and anxiety to make sure the water is done before cold weather sets in. And so we had that very conversation with the contractor the other day.
Right.
So let's make sure we get ample crews out there. They've been focusing on the work. It's the same contractor doing Pleasant Street.
Okay.
So they're in a good spot on Pleasant Street, and they're about ready to shift their crews over to Forest.
Okay, so it's more that the contractor is behind and not that there's a delay that's going on.
Correct, those are
with
separate, those are totally separate.
Okay.
Yep, but I can understand why you're, yeah.
I'm not gonna be in the way.
If we don't, email DPW and
Yeah.
they can give you some updates.
Roland,
Roland, go ahead. Hi, Roland.
yeah, say your name.
Roland Williams, 54 Forest Street. Speaking to the right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a general question. Self-signaling's contractor's been starting work as early as 6:30 in the morning. And so and I've been in contact with the police and their detective Ramos has assured me that they're not supposed to be starting until 8 a.m. So what I was hoping is that you can confirm that is in fact the start time, 8 a.m. That's all.
So you want to answer that, Greg? Or you want me to?
Yeah, 8:07, I need to double check.
So,
Anyway, the police have, appreciate your comments, and they did follow with the contractor. They do not have permission to start it. So whatever the bylaw time,
Yeah.
whatever the bylaw time is, they need to increase.
It's 8.
So,
It's 8.
okay.
Any repercussions when they start earlier?
I believe the bylaw has a fine.
Yeah, technically, they can be fined crews, yeah. So the police have been involved with that, I can follow up with that. Thank you.
Do you have anything?
Elizabeth Thomas, Street. I had a question, actually two-part question on the CSD postponements. What time, I know this is the third time it's been postponed. What time or what day did those requests for postponing take place?
We received it on Friday.
So is there a way, clearly people have a vested interest in
Yeah.
this, and we value our time.
Mhm.
So and I had actually reached out to a member of the Combe family about this too. And I feel like it would be better served for everybody if there was a way for the public to be looped in when CST does request this from the town, either CST or the town. Notify us, like we now get on the CSTOldQuarry.com. You have the blasting reports, you have the blasting schedule, kind of that same idea, so that you're respecting everybody's time.
We'll see what we can do about that. I think that's I understand your point, and I think it's a reasonable suggestion. Sarah?
I was just going to say that on the ZBA agendas, if we know something's going to be continued, we actually
Yeah,
put it
on
in the agenda.
right.
Yeah, just so that
Yeah, you
people
can-
don't show up.
Yeah,
Exactly,
Yeah, you
thank
can
you.
amend your agenda posting to have that update.
Yeah.
yeah,
We-
and
we
I don't
can do
know.
that.
No, we are I think we have done that in the past. We're between two staff members, right, the second. So I think it's a good suggestion. I think that we'll try to put it, I think the best place is to put it on the agenda. So you should check the agenda before we come. If we can put it also with them on their listserv, that seems reasonable as well.
Thank you, it would be appreciated.
We also just updated the planning webpage, so with the phone number that rings over at the planning office across the street. So if you call that day, we'll let you know whether they requested a continuance for, what's the date? November
12th.
November 12th.
Okay.
So call that morning or early afternoon.
Sarah Pierce, you have a comment? Taking public comment?
Okay, I wanted to clarify, is this public comment section just for CST or is this
Just
for
take us.
the MBTA and the opportunity to talk with the consultant, or is that for later?
So we're, the public hearing for the MBTA zoning will start at 7 as it was posted. We're sort of having
Okay, I'm sorry.
inform,
I didn't hear the beginning of that, I'm sorry.
no, it's fine, informal discussion. So cell signaling has postponed until November, at least right now, until November 12th. No, I know it's, and there will be opportunity for public comment in the public hearing.
Great, thank you so much.
Can I go over we're not listing correspondence again on our agenda. Can I go over what correspondence we've received?
Just going to do that. So yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
We had 2 that were asked specifically for the hearing, so if you can hold on those.
Yeah. Well, I'll just mention them and say we'll discuss, yeah. On 10/19, we received an email from Lorraine Iavani, which referenced a Gloucester Daily Times article, which included a quote from our Concom chair that discussed Manchester water quality and quantity is not receiving a priority. 10/23, we had an email from Elizabeth Thomas, Gloucester Daily Times article that stated a special condition had been granted for the 6:30 a.m. time start, which was not true. 10/24, we had an email from Elizabeth Thomas forwarding an email that she had sent to the police chief regarding, I think there's been 3 to 4 times, the 5 times that they've had to call for early construction times. 10/27, Erica and Ethan Spencer regarding overlay at Newport Park, which we can discuss during the hearing, and 10/28, Lorraine Iavani regarding the planning board and select board, consider the postponement of 3A, but we can discuss that at the hearing. That was it.
Great, thank you. All right. Now we can take a 5-minute stretch. Shannon, Laura Tenney has joined us. Shannon is
Oh, thank you.
our new
654. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're gonna just take a break for 5 minutes.
I wasn't I don't think it was ever explained to us what the change.
Why don't we take this opportunity to get out some more chairs? Or are there more chairs there, Greg?
There are some.
You apparently made changes to the Allen Street.
Good to meet you in person. How are you? I'm John.
Hi, Jonathan. Apparently changes to the Allen Street. I can't tell by the
I don't have, yeah, was, board discussed that.
Oh, Mary Foley.
Yeah, we'll get to you.
Yeah. Do you have a town and advisory on this?
Email to Greg.
Yeah, because I have a lot of questions on that, but we have about the advisories. Yeah, I can send it to the meeting. That's what requested. Yeah.
Yeah, I was aware.
Pick up the units that are 26,000.
Oh, so you didn't add copies, it was just that change.
Get rid of this, get a PDF. Get rid of this.
Well, sometimes they, depending on.
Although technically they added.
Because there should be a,
Okay. So this was the change from the 6,500 to the
Yes.
6,000, and the 2,500 first.
And the same thing for the for the C Street, H Street, it added like 3 units. So that's how we got to balance what we lose with, so that we maintain compliance.
Okay.
Which was obviously an important thing.
It's just.
We didn't talk about the harbor house.
Oh, yeah, because we had the decrease of the 14, but not the increase.
Oh, yes, okay. Then we would be in trouble. Yes, that's the latest map. That's right under there. So, because we took out those 2 and the 3 at the bottom there. We
Yeah.
had to make those changes. We didn't change the maps on the other districts, just
Okay. And that I knew, I just lost sight of
yeah.
Allen Street change.
We did that before we noticed the public hearing, so.
Because it added a lot of units. To the total.
I do have a daily request. So,
How are you doing, Emily?
I'm fine, how are you?
Okay.
It's by the fall, right? Although I hear it's gonna warm up now, the kids recall quite a few times how, you know, hide the costumes.
it was filed. Those are the maps that are.
If they were filed together.
That's frustrating.
Oh, good, okay.
All right, it being 7 o'clock, I'm gonna call the public hearing to order. We have a lot of people here tonight. Thank you for coming, and a lot of people online. So I'm gonna ask that you, if you are online, that you stay muted until called upon. We'll do our very best to get to everybody, and if Mary and Sue and Peter, when we get to the public comment piece, if you see people's hands raised, help me find them, because it's hard to see everybody. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight to the public hearing for the changes in zoning and for our zoning bylaws and our zoning map with the insertion of a new section 9.4. Point, I'm going to take a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
It's Chris Olney moved and
Second.
Gordon Brewster second. A roll call vote. Laura Tenney. Here. Chris Olney.
Yes.
Sarah Creighton votes yes. Gordon Brewster.
Yeah.
Mary Foley.
Yes.
And Peter Morton.
Yes.
Okay,
Sue
thank
Filbert. And Sue.
Sue Philbrick. Sorry, I'm going to do that all night.
Here.
Sorry, Sue. As I said, thank you, everybody, for coming. The MBTA task force has worked very hard. We've had a whole large number of forums, and hopefully, come on in. It's going to be a long night to stand up. There have been a number of forums to provide a detailed look at the zoning changes. So tonight we will be actually walking through the zoning itself and taking public input on the zoning, but not getting deeply into questions and answers unless there are some common misconceptions. So we'll try to do that balance. We want to hear about the inputs from the public. So with that, I'm going to just assume that most people have been to one of the forums. Sharing. Hold on. Share. Post isn't allowing. Shoot. I have to sign in. Do we? Hold on. Sorry. Should have my email. Does anybody know if this is which communications this is? This is going to take a second. I'm sorry. This is a new computer.
I'm assuming you're on 2.
Oh, it's usually 3, and it's not on the agenda.
No.
Do you know which one it's on? Sarah, I need you to help me with the. Is it 2? You think it's 2? Well, we'll try. Sorry. And then I need to have the password. Sorry.
Passcode?
No, the password. Sorry, I have to go online.
Oh,
Do you know what they are?
I think it should be
Is it?
capital T,
Mhm.
lowercase u, c, capital S, capital P, 21.
Exclamation mark?
No,
Wrong.
it's not two.
It didn't say on the agenda. No. Yeah, let's see. Oh, no, she's got the wrong password.
Oh, it's a seaside.
Yeah. It's the right.
I only use one.
It's not that one. Okay, wait a minute. All right. There we go. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. That's a great way to start off. Okay, so welcome, everybody, to the public hearing. We're going to, like I said, start with a brief overview on the screen. Hopefully, most of you have heard this before. And okay. So the state law, as you know, was passed as an amendment to Chapter 40, and actually, if somebody can touch the, thank you. This slide simply underscores that there are. underscores that there are many requirements in the statute and in the guidelines. And we have believed that our zoning draft complies with these. The zoning does a couple of things. First, it creates overlay districts that allow multifamily with conditions. And those districts were formed to target properties and zones that were least likely to be developed on small lots in general, and lots with more than one, where there's often more than one unit already, and to connect them in a logical way. This is not, yeah, come on in. Okay. This is not zoning through the whole town. It's really only 37 acres, which is only a small fraction of the town. Districts were targeted to avoid the historic downtown and most of the commercial downtown. The idea was that we didn't want our commercial businesses like Crosby's turned into housing. By doing it our way means that we got to do it that way. And we don't know what would happen if it was done for us, because the intent was to create housing near the MBTA station. And then we created, or the task force, the zoning that we propose that is before us tonight creates regulations on size, height, setbacks, parking, as well as affordability and design standards. There were some guiding principles, and those were to maintain the character of the town, preserve our businesses, have a scale and style that was consistent with the town, and to minimize the number of units that would actually get built by excluding the historic district and requiring design review. As I said, excluding the downtown commercial area, including many small parcels, height limits, and assigning a maximum number of units where possible, and selecting parcels where development was less likely. And all of this went into a giant model that the state gave us, and we believe that they these 4 districts, otherwise called Community Housing Overlay District, or CHODs, catchy name, which will allow multifamily units with some restrictions in terms of size, in terms of setbacks and number, height, and so forth, and will require a design review for all multifamily units that are taking advantage of this by right use. And if there's a property in any of these districts, the uses that are allowed today remain. There are no changes to those. And as you can see, it's only 4 areas of town. People should have seen these. The other thing, all of these things are on the website. I'll show you how to get to that. Of course, if you're watching from home, you can go to the town website, and right on the front page, there's a radio button for Manchester MBTA zoning. And you can, there's a wealth of information, frequently asked questions, maps, a couple of videos with a couple more coming that walk you through these districts on foot to show you them. They are made by the members of the task force, so may not win an Academy Award, but might. And I really encourage you to walk through those districts in the videos, which should be up. I think 2 are up now, and the others are almost done. So the first district, is the Pine Street district. It's not all of it. It's the area as seen here, just below Rice Lane, includes Newport and Newport Park and Powder House, and Lower Pine Street to the gas station. And this has 2 sub-districts. 2 of our districts or CHODs have sub-districts so that we could regulate the height, setback, and number of units separately. And they were designed to comply with the model in a way that links these together. And as I should have said in the beginning, we submitted a draft of the zoning to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, who has given us some feedback, which we modified the draft to reflect, but by and large, they were indicated that our proposed zoning did comply with their regulations. So Lower Pine Street is the first district. The second district is called Beach to C Street. It includes 10 to 12 Summer Street, which, as you know, was relatively recently redeveloped. As I said before, it avoids the commercial properties. And again, has two sub-districts with different requirements in them. And as we go through the zoning, we will be talking and getting your input on those details. The third district is Allen Ave to Lincoln Street, shown here. Basically from Allen Ave up Summer Street to just beyond Lincoln Street, including the gas station and including the condos on Brook Street, shown there sort of in the middle of the screen. And the last district is Beaver Dam Road. It's in the limited commercial district on the east side of School Street. It's currently used as a storage facility, and it's about 6 acres. And that has the highest density. These 4 districts are combined to meet all of those complex requirements that I flashed before you in the beginning. So it's an intricate math puzzle. If you take some density away from one section, you have to add it to another. If you take some acreage away from one section, you have to add it to another because the numbers all have to add up. So it's basically a giant algebra problem. With that, those are the modifications. So the zoning article references modifications to the zoning map, and these 4 districts are the modifications to the zoning map because they create overlay districts in those 4 areas. And then those overlay districts are given the multifamily rights in the zoning. I'm going to come back to that table if we need to. There also is a set of things in the zoning called design standards and site plan review for multifamily units. And that for all multifamily units who take advantage of the this use, they would have to go to a design review board, and there is guidelines and about style, types of roof lines, scale, finish materials, not to make all of the multifamily units look the same, but actually in contrast to make them as varied as the housing that we have in town. And we were advised by some architects who live in town who develop the standards, and a number of the folks who do development on the task force indicated that when you come before a town and there are design standards, you do your best to comply with those because that expedites your process. The other thing about site plan review and this design standards is that abutters would be notified and able to give input to the developer, or the individual. I use the word developer loosely because if you own a property in this in one of these CHODs, you could add on 2 units for your family. It's that this is not necessarily just developers. It's anyone who
Should we bring some chairs in from the other room? There's some people out in the hall.
We may want to just why don't I do the breaking point in a minute, so take a second and do that. Lastly, I wanted just to point out that there are affordable housing requirements. These are registered affordable housing units, and the state allows 10% of the units to be affordable unless we have done a economic feasibility study, which we did do. And the economic feasibility study said that we have a need for affordable units, and thus we can require the maximum, which is 20% of the units. And so the little table on the right shows how that would work. A developer can build more, and the idea is that a higher density, as well as this requirement, creates a variety of housing types and housing price points. And that's the goal. So we are going to take public comment on the zoning. I'm going to try to limit, we have a lot of people and we want to make sure we hear from everybody. So I'm going to ask that you try to limit your comments to be succinct, state your name and your address, and try to give us the unique ideas here and input. It's not that helpful to hear the same thing over and over, but you can certainly speak it if you like. We're going to try to get to everybody. First, we'll take comment from the public and then from the board, and we are going to look in detail at the zoning, of which there's handouts. So with that, I'll take a breath, and before we chug our way through the zoning, which is dry and tedious, but I don't know how else to do it. We'll grab a few more chairs if people want to grab some more chairs from the other room and squish a few more people.
Exceptions are and are.
Seats to the left. Or late.
So, I'm now going to share the zoning. Sarah Pierce, do you have a procedural question, or I'm trying not to.
Yeah, well, I have a couple of questions and comments, so is it okay to ask them now?
Why don't we walk, we're going to walk through the zoning, and we're going to take comments on each section of the zoning. So we're going to do it that way.
Okay.
So just to clarify, we're trying to get comments on the zoning. After that, we will also hear later in the meeting the fiscal analysis, the propensity to change study, and about the grants that are in jeopardy if we fail to pass this. And we will then be talking about, and we'll take an additional set of comments at that time. So try to keep your comments right now to the zoning that we're going to take section by section. So, Mark, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Resnick, who is our planner, and we are going to
Sarah, were you going to show a table? You said you were going to go back to that slide.
Yep, that table is in the zoning. It's the table in the zoning. The table on section 9.45. 9.4.5. We do have two guests tonight. Emily Ennis, who has been working with us on this, and Jonathan Murray from KP Law, who's town council. So that I'm going to turn it over to Mark, who is going to sort of summarize the sections of the zoning. We'll start with purpose. I start with purpose, establishment, and definitions.
Okay, all the purpose of the bylaw it says that we are, it is to comply with Section 3A of the Zoning Act, and that it's written in order to preserve the character of the town and minimize the impact on the community as well as add options for multifamily housing, which is what the law says we need to do. The establishment and applicability is the next section, and that is what establishes the districts. Remember, the districts are overlay districts, so we're not changing any of the underlying districts. The underlying districts still govern what you may or may not do with your property, unless you want to do multifamily housing in compliance with this bylaw. And it establishes the 4 districts that Sarah just showed on the map up on the screen. And then the next section is definitions that we have added specifically into the zoning, into this bylaw as it relates to interpretation of this bylaw.
Okay, so I'm going to pause and take any comments on those sections. Sarah Pierce, please state your name and address, please.
Sarah Pierce, 9 Friend Street. Thank you. I'm not quite sure where this fits in, but this seems to be the appropriate place. I know that we received a letter from the EOHLC at the end of September, and there were a few issues with us being actually compliant with the zoning mandate. And I'm wondering if we, at this point, have received a new updated approval letter from the EOHLC with all of those conditions or requirements they've asked us to fulfill. In addition, I just would like some clarification, and I have another question for another section, but if it states on here that we are at a unit capacity of 559 units, and I would like to have that confirmed by Emily Innes, as well as if we have received an updated letter from the EOHLC, because it states here that we are in interim compliance and not actual compliance.
Okay, so I'm going to try to consolidate a few of those comments. I think we're not required to submit to HLC again, right? So we're following the process, and we've made changes based on their letter.
So we won't get final compliance until after the bylaw is passed by town meeting, and then that final version that gets passed by the town gets submitted to EOHLC. So the interim compliance is things that they see as red flags or things that they identify as needing to be corrected. Our issues were relatively minor, and we've addressed them.
Okay, Lauren Bunker, you have a comment. I'd like to try to keep the comments right now on the zoning, but go ahead.
Okay, hi, Lauren Bunker, and I'm at 26 Pine Street. I think that this has to do with zoning because I'm in the zone district. So a developer bought the 2 lots next to me, and my question is, based on the zone by right, what I understand is he can put up 25 units. So he can come in through Pine Street, he can come in through Deer Hill Road. There's 1.5 parking spots. Where are people going to park? If it's zoned by right, what does that actually even mean? Like you said that you will tell them what it can look like, but like what about the water runoff coming down the hill? I don't know, is this a zoning question?
Yeah. I think it's a question relative to the maps. So we did.
Where are people going to park? Like,
so hold on.
What about the traffic?
Okay,
all that stuff.
So let's say we did make a change to the draft zoning that any division of land had to comply with the underlying frontage and lot requirements. So that would, and then,
That's in the next
So-
section.
so
We'll
there's-
be
sorry,
getting,
frontage,
so,
we'll be getting to your questions in some of the other sections as it relates to site plan review, as it relates to parking, and as it relates to lot division. So just listen and your questions will be answered.
right.
So if
but
I could just point out too, the change that we made to, say, have the underlying zoning be for if a lot to be subdivided, that has not been verified through EOHLC yet. So we won't know that until after town meeting and after we submit it. Is that correct?
Other communities have restricted how you can divide. They've restricted it to the underlying zoning districts as well, so that you can't take a big lot and chop it up into lots of smaller lots. So we're not the only community to do that.
So just my question is, that was not part of the pre-approval.
That's correct.
I also just want to, Lauren, you said that that combination of lots could have 25 units, and that is absolutely not the case. So that is, I don't have in front of me the numbers, but I know that it's not 25 lots. So, okay, let's, I'd like Sandy R.
Well, excuse me,
No.
Mrs. Sarah,
No.
you didn't answer my question. I asked about the unit capacity, and I had another comment and question,
Sarah.
and it does do with zoning.
Thank you. We will do our best to answer questions as they go along. I've asked Emily to help us record them, and we'll try to take them in, because a lot of them are related, right? So, Sandy, do you have comments on the zoning in front of us?
Yes, I don't know if it's the right time, but hopefully it will be answered. Thank you. Sandy Rogers, 82 Old Essex Road. I am a bit confused at some information that I've been seeing. I know that the task force had purposely zoned over some condominium buildings under the idea that those would be more difficult to get everyone to agree to change. But I've also seen that the 3A law might override condominium laws that are in place. And I wanted to know if you knew anything about that.
Jonathan, you want to just comment on that?
Jonathan Murray, KP Laws, Town Council. 3A and local zoning adopted by towns will not override condominium bylaws. They will not override, local restrictions or privately held restrictions. It is zoning just like any other zoning towns pass, and so it allows or disallows uses. It doesn't interfere with those private contract rights like condominium bylaws.
Great, thank you. Okay.
So the
Sandy,
idea is that
Sandy.
one of the units, if it's owned, if it sells, it still needs to adhere to condominium law.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
any comments on the definitions through sections, line number 67? Okay, we will get to other comments, but let's try to keep it to the sections we're talking about. We will have opportunity for the general conversations. Mark, back to permitted uses.
Okay, permitted uses, there are 3 subsections. The first permitted uses are uses that are permitted as of right, and this is where we specifically say multifamily housing. And we also specifically allow, if you're in the general district, to combine, although it's not required because we can't require it, to combine some commercial uses to create a mixed-use building with residential above. We also allow accessory uses as it relates to parking and home occupation. And then we have a section for accessory uses by special permit. This section has been recommended that we remove by council because our bylaw should not have any special permit requirements, even if they do not relate to the actual housing, but they are in the bylaw. So it feels that it would invalidate our 50% passage rate, and we would have to have a 2/3 approval at town meeting. So he has recommended that we remove subsection 3.
Is that something we can do now?
Yeah, so, Jonathan, you want to speak to that to clarify?
Sure. So, Madam Chair, and to the members of the board, I'm sure you'll recall just until a few years ago, 2021, I think it was, all zoning amendments required a 2/3 vote at town meeting. When the legislature and the governor enacted what was the Housing Choice Act, which included the MBTA 3A provisions, they also amended 40A5, which is the procedure to adopt a zoning bylaw amendment, and they created specific categories of uses that could be adopted by a simple majority vote. And so in the case of 3A, it's multifamily housing allowed as a right. The caveat to that section is at the very end, it says a simple majority vote shall not be combined with a 2/3 vote. And the way we've interpreted that is if you combine a simple majority vote and a 2/3 vote, the whole article requires a 2/3 vote. And so I've given the opinion, and my recommendation was 9.4.43, accessory uses by special permit. The uses listed under that section don't qualify under any of the simple majority categories in 40A5. So if you recommend to include them, the whole article becomes a 2/3 vote. So if it was the board's recommendation to keep this a simple majority vote, I would recommend taking this out at this time, but that wouldn't prevent the town or the board, someone else recommending at a future town meeting, putting something like this in or something similar, or you could always amend that later on. But that's my recommendation at this time.
And then, Chris,
Well, I was wondering whether that's appropriate to do right now.
well, I think we'll do it when we recommend the zoning, but we'll.
Or you want to do it at the end?
But I think we would like, so I think the change would be to put a period at the end of line 84 and strike line 85 through 91. That-
80.
So 84.
86.
84, because you want to say, you want to strike the except the Beaver Dam District.
Oh, okay. Yep. Then that's fine. I would say then as part of your final motion, you can note that change in the final motion.
So, so I'm going to take comments now just on, because this is the important permitted uses. Comments on two portions. The permitted uses, the accessory uses, and the proposed change, which is to put a period at the end of 84 and strike 86 through 91. 85, sorry. Here, yeah. Comments from the public. Christine.
Hi, thanks. Christine Delucio, 6 Lincoln Avenue. So I guess just generally, I haven't seen how this is actually going to be implemented. So the comment earlier was, special permit. So who is this going to? Is this going to the building inspector? And then my second part of that is Mark had said that the underlying zoning is going to prevent somebody from chopping up a large piece of land. But that's the essence of a subdivision. So are you saying that any property in a district is not going to be allowed to be subdivided?
No, it doesn't prevent them from subdividing, but it does require them to follow whatever the current zoning requirements are for lot size if they choose to divide the land, whether it's through a Form A application or a subdivision application.
But that is the essence of taking a large parcel and chopping it up, right? So subdividing it. So you're saying that you are allowed to do that?
You are allowed to do it, provided you follow the underlying zoning district density requirements for frontage and lot size.
And if you were to do a subdivision, you would have to follow subdivision rules.
In addition, yes, you would have, you're gonna put a road in for create frontage, yes.
So,
Okay, so the question
my
was,
second question was, according to the special permit, so you just took that out, but Beaver Dam also falls over the water resource district. So are we saying that we now are not able to require a special permit in that district that's so critical to our drinking water?
Yes.
So yes, we cannot require any kind of conditions over our drinking water because of the.
Not, that's not true. So we are, in the later section, we have where we removed the special permit requirement, but they still have to comply with all of the specific design criteria for that particular district and some others. So we'll get to that in a few more sections.
So I just to be
hold
clear,
on, Christine,
I just want
let's
to hear you say that. So
Okay.
there is no enforcement of a special permit in the water resource district, correct?
that is not correct.
That's not correct.
That is not correct.
You can't
Okay.
require a special
I'm gonna-
permit as it is written today. No?
You can't require a special permit, but you can enforce the regulations that are required for a special permit.
Okay, other comments from people? As Mark said, this issue is later in the zoning, so seeing others. Okay, so the dimensional standards, unfortunately, this table goes on to 2 pages. Mark, I'm gonna let you try to summarize it. I'm going to suggest that you summarize the idea and let people read through the language themselves.
Okay, so the idea, or what we have here is all of the zoning districts are across the top, including the sub-districts. And then what we have in the chart is the dimensional requirements for each of these districts. So it's the lot size that's needed, or the amount of land area that's needed to have to be able to do multifamily housing, which is 3 or more units. And then there's a base lot requirement and additional square footage requirement. So if you have 6,000 square feet, you're allowed to have 3 units. We have some caps for a few of our districts as far as the number of units that are allowed on a property. We also have, as in all dimensional tables, we have frontage, lot width, height, and setback requirements, and lot coverage requirements. And so many of these requirements are similar to, if not exactly the same, as our underlying zoning district requirements. So then we have several other sections within this 9.4.5. The key one, couple key ones to point out is number 4, which is lot division, and this gets to the previous questions having to do with the division of land and referring to the minimum lot size and frontage requirement of the underlying base zoning. So you have to comply if you're going to try and create more additional lots out of a larger parcel. You have to comply with the requirements of the underlying district. The next one has to do with accessory structures, and we did find another special permit in the first line that we should remove. It says, in the CHOD, accessory structure shall require a special permit from the planning board and shall be set back from the side and rear lot lines as required in underlying zoning district. So I recommend that we remove the starting in the shell in line 106 and going up to and removing the second shall. So we require a special permit from the planning board and shall. Remove those words, so it just says,
You're gonna need the shell.
yeah, we need one of those shells, yes.
Keep a shell.
We'll keep a shell, so in the CHOD, accessory structures shall be set back from the side and rear lot lines as required by the underlying zoning district. That's how that sentence should read.
Okay.
And so then we have exceptions for chimneys and towers and other architectural features, energy installations. And then we get to the last one, structured parking, which also requires a special permit. And so I would recommend that we remove number 8 as it relates to allowing structured parking.
So you're recommending remove lines 125 through 128?
That's correct. The model is based on surface parking, so removing that structured parking requirement here, and I believe in one of those allowance for structured parking doesn't affect the model in any way.
Mark, since we're changing this on the fly here, can you go back to the 106 accessory structures? Which was originally requiring a special permit. Can we put a size limit on these? We have no size limit on accessory structures. And if we're now increasing impervious surfaces in like the Newport and Powder House districts, which is 70%, and I think in our current bylaws it's 50%. So we're covering a lot more surface land. I think it makes sense that we set a reasonable accessory structure size.
Well, we have a limitation that they shall not exceed 25 feet from the ground or 1.5 stories. So we don't have a square foot requirement, but we do have some requirements here on accessory structures.
I just think to have a square foot, to address some massing issues, to have a square foot limit, I think would help ease residents' minds that not every square inch of a lot could be built upon. If it was going to be required through a special permit process, there would be some oversight, and if there's no oversight with that size, I think we should stipulate it here.
Do you have a suggested size limit?
I think we would have to think about that a little bit. I mean, I could throw something out, but I don't know if it makes sense. 500 square feet, something like that. 250 square feet. I mean, I think if we're saying they're going to be sheds, maybe 250 square feet. I don't know what these accessory structures are going to be.
Well, so the problem is if you're building, let's say, just a regular, residential parking garage, and for 3 cars, I mean, just that alone is probably 700 or 800 square feet. One for each of, let's say, it's a 3-unit building. You want to have at least 1 car for each unit under cover. So I think that's a low number is my point, and I think trying to start adding and figuring that out. I think it would fall under site plan review, so it would be something that we would be evaluating through site plan review and looking at the the layout of the property and how everything works and conforms. So I think I don't think I'd recommend a.
Would
So
lot,
I guess-
lot coverage cover it anyway?
What's that?
Lot coverage would restrict the size of an accessory dwelling unit anyway.
Yeah, but what we see happens is they'll put gravel instead of pavement because they've built an accessory structure, and then they'll say that's pervious. And so there's all sorts of workarounds. And when things are by right, as long as it meets what's in the bylaw, you cannot put conditions on it. So we couldn't, during a site plan review, say, oh, well, 500 square feet seems large, we want it to be 250, and that they would comply. I mean, if we don't put anything in here, it's an unknown. So I'm just making that recommendation.
Greg, was that your point about lot coverage was the?
Right, I think you're following the existing lot coverage maximums, minimums, so
No, we're
there's no
not.
changes.
No, that's not correct.
What has changed?
So so for the Newport and Powder House, which is District D and G, I think in our current bylaws, it's 50%, and this is 70%.
40%.
40%, this is
Existing is
70%.
40 for structures.
So we
Okay, besides those two exceptions.
But this is 40%.
Yep, existing is 40.
Yeah, so it's the same as the underlying zone.
So this is 7. What am I?
It's, sorry to interrupt, it's structures is 40, structures plus impervious
Right.
surface is 70.
Yeah, that's
But your
what I'm looking
structure,
at.
yeah, absolutely, but
Yeah.
your structure is still limited to 40, so that would include an accessory, the house, the accessory garage, the, 3-family house and accessory garage, to use Mark's example, and any other structure like a shed, all have to fit within that 40%. And
No.
then the impervious surface is separate.
Understood. I'm referring to the structures and impervious surfaces. So in the current, it's 50 and now it's 70. That's a big difference.
It's a
Structures
structure.
are still limited to
I
40.
think we're talking about the structure, which is the accessory structure, is for, there's no change for structures. There could be, your point is that there could be additional impervious surface than what is currently allowed.
But not for structures.
In those structures. Yeah. Let's hear from the public on the, this is a big chunk here. Dimensional standards. And I do want to just point out to the prior comment by Lauren Bunker that this is where the maximum dwellings per lot comes in this district, Lower Pine to Powder House district. Maximum dwelling units per lot is 5. And as Mark said, if they are divided, they have to meet the underlying zoning. So that's why the math doesn't work for that large number that you stated. Okay, let's see, comments from the room?
2 hands on the eyes.
I'm looking for people who we haven't heard from yet. Roland?
Roland, live in 54 Forest Street. Just kind of a general question. I'm curious how Beaver Dam, with 100 units, ended up being included in this. It's nowhere near an MBTA station. I'm just wondering.
It's part of that
Can
algebra.
I answer that? Yeah, that's part of the algebra problem. The thing is, if we don't have it at Beaver Dam, we're gonna have to put 100 units in the downtown. So it seemed like an easy trade-off to us, especially when Beaver Dam is already a successful development and is unlikely to be developed. So that's why it was selected.
But how does it connect to MBTA and create?
So we have to allow 559 units somewhere in this town. We have zoned areas that have 250 units roughly already, but we still have to find more space for more units. And the question is, where in town can we put them? We thought it would be better to put them not in the downtown, to take the pressure off as much as we can.
And you're
The consideration for the fact that it's right to our water supply is not
That's,
a concern?
there's a storage facility next to our water supply now.
Right. But this is.
We're not controlling it very well. Well, but that's the point, exactly. We might make conditions better out there by having residential use.
sure that really answers the
I
question.
mean, so only, the law requires only 40% of the units that we zone for be within the half mile of the train station. The other 60% can be elsewhere. We are anywhere in the unit. So, and we have to go by units parcel size, because we have to zone for a particular density. So after doing our other 3 districts, we needed something where we could have approximately 100 units on a parcel with a certain density. So
a big building, something like this facility up in Gloucester.
yeah, if someone developed that, it would probably, again, we have design control over what the buildings look like, and they may not be as high as the Gloucester buildings, but there are many examples, if you drive along 128, where you see multifamily housing developments of a cluster of larger buildings. So if that ever got developed, we would maybe see something like that. Maybe you'd see really nice high-end townhomes. Think about where it is, surrounded by conservation land. So maybe that might happen. But most likely nothing's going to happen because they're in the midst of doing an extensive expansion and cleanup of the property. So at least for the foreseeable future, it's going to probably continue to be what it is. So.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps, but.
In the back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Stephanie Rogers, 59 Forest. So yeah, along these same lines on the Beaver Dam Road, I'm concerned about, I understand, like, okay, where right in town is there a place to put this house? And I like the idea that it's been very thoughtfully done as far as trying to pocket smaller places every, which way. But then all of a sudden you're throwing this huge amount over on Beaver Dam, which is also where cell signaling is going. And so you're going to have 500 plus employees coming in and off on School Street and the 128 exit. And now the possibility of 100 units, which I don't even know how many cars that means, coming in and out of there as well. I can't even imagine the traffic that's going to go between Essex and Manchester. And that the traffic is my concern, and coming in and off of those exits is already pretty dangerous.
Thank you. Ann.
Stupid correction.
Ann Harrison.
Ann Harrison, us, 13 Tux Point Road. Line 120, photovoltaic, solar thermal, living, no comma, because living and other equal use is one thought.
Thank you. Okay, Sandy Rogers.
Great, I have 2 separate sort of questions. One is if you get rid of, let me see if I had this up, 125 through 128 with structured parking, does that mean that any location in any of these overlays can build the structured parking? And then if they do, where within the zoning do we mandate how high it can be, et cetera, et cetera? That's my first question. The second one is what I'm reading here is Newport Park and Beach Street have only a 5-foot frontage. Is that what it is now, or has that changed? Because that is awfully close to the road for such high density. Thank you.
General district is 5 feet.
So the answer that Sarah has provided is that that is the underlying zoning for front setback. Answer that question. Just checking.
For general district, District D, and District B.
So that is consistent with the underlying zoning.
District D. Where's that?
So
Is that what the district to use 10 feet?
Right, that's right. Only G is 5 feet.
For G, which is Beach Street, is 5. And Newport Park is, and Powder House are back.
Newport Park doesn't have street frontage.
Right, doesn't have street. Okay.
I can't hear, I'm sorry, it's hard to hear what's being said.
Well, Newport Park doesn't really sit on the street, on Pine Street. So it already, the setback wouldn't matter.
Okay.
But there is a setback there.
Yeah, it's like 30 feet.
So it's now 30, we're reducing it to 5.
It doesn't have frontage.
But it doesn't have frontage, it doesn't have enough frontage on Pine Street to allow a building to be placed 5 feet away from the street.
It's 10 feet.
10 feet in the underline.
And Beach Street,
Beach Street's in the general district, so it's 5 feet.
Yeah. Emily, can you help us, or Mark, with the question of parking structures? Absent the CHOD, if I wanted to build a parking structure for a business or a use today.
I'm just checking the uses unless you allow it. Okay, so you would want to look at 2A, which says parking including surface parking and parking within a structure such as an attached or detached above ground or underground parking lot, parking garage on the same lot as the principal use. So that is now allowed as an accessory use. The structured parking in 8, which is line 125, this was limiting it to only the Newport Powder House subdistrict and the Beaver Dam district with that special permit from the planning board. So if you were wanting to put any restrictions on it, we would want to think about modifying this paragraph. If you wanted to remove the option of structured parking, then you would need to take it out of line 81, 80, sorry, it's actually in line 82.
Okay. So I think the question is, do we want to allow structured parking first and foremost? And we can't have it by special permit. And then to Mary's point, or somebody's point, if we're going to allow it, should have limit.
If I recall the discussion from the task force, and I think a little bit from the planning board as well, the question was being able to differentiate between an accessory garage, for example, the one that Mark mentioned earlier for, say, a three-family house or a five-family house versus a structured parking garage for a larger scale development, such as a Beaver Dam size development. So I think you would want to think about the idea of a garage that was attached within a building, like a townhouse that has a garage, there was a concern as to whether or not that would follow the definition of a structured garage. So I think we would want to look at the definition of a structured garage in the current zoning to parse this out.
I don't think it's there. I don't think there's one.
There's a definition on page 580 for parking structure. And it's it's unclear to me the difference between a parking structure and structured parking. But the intention of that definition is to make a difference between a multi-level parking structure and a single level, whether it's above ground, below ground.
Sorry, Ann, tell me where that is.
580.
Line 580?
Yep.
Yeah, it's additional definitions. The very last page.
Madam Chair, can I inquire of the town's consultant? To the extent it's a separate accessory structure too, it would have to comply with the 25-foot height limitation, the 1.5-story height limitation, and as we discussed, the maximum structure lot coverage in the table as well. So there would be some built in.
Yeah. The other thing is that in our current underlying zoning, garaging or maintaining of more than 4 automobiles when accessory to a dwelling, so that might be a garage for 8 vehicles, is requires a special permit from the ZBA.
Yes.
And so the question, but not in the is not allowed in the LCD.
So let me just check the parking regs in here. We would just need to double check that that was not precluded anyway by the requirements in here. I don't think they are, but we could double check that. If we got a sense, I think, from what the board, I don't think it is.
I don't think it's.
Yeah, but we could double check, given a sense from the board is the direction they want to go.
Okay, so, back to the change at hand, I'm a little confused as to,
I mean,
what our recommendation is for this amendment to the.
Yeah, I recommend moving this and the other references to structured parking.
Completely take them out of the language altogether.
It's not necessary for our compliance. Our model is run without structured parking.
And you allow for it from the
And
ZBA.
we allow already, they have a requirement for more than a certain number that has to go, it's already in the zoning, so that's covered. Plus, it also has to comply with the 1.5 story, 25 feet. Lot coverage requirements, there's a lot of checks and balances on that.
Okay, I'm gonna ask that people, we have a lot of people here that we try to keep any chatter to the minimum. Everybody can hear who's online. Thank you. So the recommendation from the planner is that we remove this reference to structured parking. I think the reason that we wanted to consider it was, particularly in the Beaver Dam district, is that if you allow a structure, you reduce the footprint of your impervious surface. And so, and similarly, that in those districts, and that was the rationale, is that to have a structured parking might, particularly in Beaver Dam, reduce your amount of impervious surface. So that was the rationale. So the alternative there is to just remove the special permit requirement. But we also could, don't forget, we want to have a compliant model here. This could be added with a very simple change to the zoning table in a springtime meeting. Just allow structure, that garaging in the LCD with a changing yes to a ZBA in this table. And that's what John?
Yes, John Round, Greenbrier Road. So by removing that, that means the maximum height for a parking garage could be 45 feet.
No.
It's accessory use, 25.
Because it's
1.5
subject to the
stories.
accessory
Yeah,
use
accessory.
requirement. Okay, so, because it's 45 for the building there,
Right.
but only 25 is an accessory. All right.
Okay, so let's continue to take comment.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think
Sandy,
that
you've had your
there
chance
needs
from
to
this.
be regulations on those kinds of structures somewhere
Okay,
by
thank you.
special permit to be reviewed, because they are different from the housing. So,
Okay, thank you.
just to be sure that it's in there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could we point
Christine.
out, I'm sorry,
Christine, let's.
are we gonna talk about all these changes at the end? Because this is a lot.
Yes, we will. Christine?
So I did ask before earlier and I didn't get an answer on it. I wanted to see like where the procedures are if you wanted to ask for a special permit or a variance, like where are those outlined? And I would like to hear from town council after several years, what's the criteria that this board could deny site plan review?
Madam Chair, to answer either your first question, what are the procedures for special permits or variances? Those are the existing procedures for special permit and variance in the zoning bylaws. So that would still, to the extent that those procedures were applicable to any project, you would use the ones that you currently have. As to your second question about when can you deny site plan review? Site plan review is non-discretionary review by local municipal boards, not to prohibit a use, but to regulate aesthetic, site circulation, environmental, design guidelines, features of a property that would need some sort of site review. The case law and the Massachusetts courts have said that the proper way for a board to deal with site plan review is to allow it, or allow it with conditions so that the proposed use and the proposed project can move forward because it's for as of right use. There are extremely, extremely rare circumstances, and I use the word extremely twice there to emphasize the point, that you may deny site plan review, but they are so rare that it has to do with safety issues and not being able to reasonably regulate an as of right use. They're so incredibly rare. I don't want the impression that this is a tool in a site plan reviewing authority's toolbox. Site plan review, the purpose is to regulate as of right uses. Boards may condition them, but they generally, in almost all circumstances, can't deny site plan review.
And can you speak to the site plan review as a way in the bylaw we're about to get to, for the uses that currently have a special permit? In particular, the watershed.
Sure. So the feedback my office has got from EOHLC, I'm sure Emily's gotten the same feedback, is that when it comes to special purpose overlay districts, so watershed protection and water supply protection, and there's a few other examples, that cities and towns can't require a separate special permit connected to the as of right use under 3A. So you can't allow multifamily housing as of right, but then require a discretionary special permit or a non-discretionary special permit. What the state has said, though, is that you can take all of those criteria that applicants need to comply with and put them in your 3A site plan review process. So a proposed use, a proposed application comes before the site plan reviewing authority. They have to show you that they meet all of the criteria. If they don't meet a criteria, according to the standards in the bylaw, the site plan review authority may condition the site plan so that that criteria is met or mitigated. And then if that condition is violated, you would enforce, well, not you all, the building inspector would enforce just like any other condition, a condition to a special permit or a violation of the zoning bylaw. The building inspector is the enforcement authority for the town. They would enforce either by fines or seeking a court order.
So can I, because we asked for your opinion, but we never officially got it, so I have a lot of questions on this. Can you give some clarity around conditions? So maybe an example is better. If we have design guidelines,
yep.
And we say we want certain structural architecture, whatever it may be, can we condition a site plan that basically says if an applicant does not abide by these design guidelines, they do not get approval?
So it would be, the answer is yes, but with a caveat for clarification. So you would, in that theory, in that example you just gave, you would issue a site plan approval with the conditions that you must comply with the substantive criteria in the zoning bylaw. And so that would be the design review standards that you have in here. So that would be a condition of your site plan. If someone came in and built a lead box that didn't meet the design standards, then the building inspector would be tasked with enforcing your condition on the site plan review.
And what's the enforcement?
Fines under either criminal or non-criminal disposition, that's chapter 40, section 21D, or zoning enforcement order under 40A7. I would say that's probably the more common route. And so that's a cease and desist order or an order to comply with the zoning bylaws. That order is appealable to the ZBA. And if there is no enforcement, we go into Superior Court or Land Court and seeking a court order requiring compliance with the order.
So do our current bylaws have that fine in place?
Yes.
And with the water resource overlay, earth removal, flood control, in the bylaw, can we just reference those bylaws, or do we have to list out all the criteria?
So I think the way that you all have it here, and I'm just going to look at it, this would be 947D, starting at line 238, and 240. For the purposes of this section 9.4, the criteria for granting a special permit for each of the districts below are incorporated into the planning board site plan review process as described in 949. The applicant for development within the COHD is not required to apply for a special permit for the purposes of the uses listed in 9.4D. And then it talks about your earth removal, flood control, and ground and surface water overlay. So those criteria, by virtue of this second section, are incorporated into your site plan review for 3A uses. As to how you formulate your decision or conditions, that's kind of a board preference on how you'd like to do either reference or state them specifically. That's up to the board on their preference on how to write your decisions.
Okay, so at the end of it, you're saying we can enforce special permit conditions in a site plan condition. The thing that a special permit allows is an appeal process for abutters or other parties. A site plan does not.
No, aggrieved parties can appeal from
Not to our ZBA.
to court.
To court?
Yep.
To state court.
Same process.
State court.
Yep.
Okay. And so.
And can I just,
Yeah.
because I think the wording is really important.
Yeah.
So it's not special permit conditions, it's criteria of the zoning bylaw. So what we're not enforcing is special permit conditions, it's the criteria of the earth removal bylaw, the criteria of the flood control, and the criteria of the ground and surface water overlay. That's what gets conditioned in your site plan approval. It's not special permit conditions, because that would necessitate the issuance of a special permit. So it's the substantive criteria of your zoning bylaws, which can still be enforced, can still be conditioned, but via site plan approval, which has to be approved.
Okay, and then to another question that was asked, so is the process they must come to a site plan approval before getting a building permit?
Yes.
Okay, so it might be a 4-meeting process here before it ever gets to the, okay, so, okay, and where's that laid out, or that's just an?
That's the normal, so.
Right.
Yeah, so under the state building code, which is 780 CMR, when the building inspector gets the building permit application, he has to make sure that zoning is complied with. So one, he would look to make sure, is this a use allowed in the district? Does it meet the dimensional requirements? And then if your bylaw says this use requires a site plan review, a special permit, whatever it may be, he has to check that box off before he signs the building permit application. If he gets an application for a 3A multifamily use that hasn't gotten site plan review, he could, the process is he says either denied or he refers it back to you all to say, applicant wants to do this use, but they need site plan approval first.
Okay.
And just to clarify, and they also need to have the design review.
Which is part of the site plan,
Well, yeah, it's a separate process.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful, thank you.
All right, let's go back to the comments on the, trying to keep it, we were on that section with the, before we get.
My name is Bob Neal. Am I in this meeting or not?
You are in a meeting of the zoning.
Thank you. And when I want to raise a question, what do I do?
Well, why don't you go ahead?
Are we still on zoning?
We are.
I would like to recommend that we do not vote in favor of the zoning, and we should postpone the vote on zoning. I think we're lost in the details.
Okay.
We should postpone the vote on the special town meeting on the 18th November.
Okay, and you're.
It's a forever vote. If we vote yes, it's done. We should not vote yes. We should postpone that vote. The grants are marginal in all of this. The grants have averaged $60,000 a year against a $40 million budget per year. The grants are not a major issue. We can handle that. More housing will lead to financial disaster for Manchester. More infrastructure, not enough taxes. We will lose the quality of the life we have here. Already traffic is a problem. It's going to get much worse. We will have major water issues. And I think the select board is not doing a good job of explaining this to the people. We are lost in the details, and you've led us into the details. Everybody's got details, and nobody sees the forest through the trees. That's my comments. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Can you give us your address, please?
114 Beach Street.
Great, thank you so much. Okay.
I wanted to bring up an email that we had that I referenced at the beginning, and they weren't able to make it tonight.
Okay, go ahead.
It's in this section.
Sure.
It was from Erica and Ethan Spencer, and the planning board got it. I think everybody reviewed it, but they live on Pine Street, and their concern is impact for Newport Park impacting the conservation area, and that they never thought that it would move beyond the footprint of the current buildings. And the proposed changes are asking us, so kind of the Pine Street area, which includes Lower Pine, Newport Park, and Powder House, to bear a disproportionate share of the burden of complying with 3A. And so if you do add up the numbers, that section of Pine Street is almost half of the 352 proposed units. So that is a lot in that one dense area. And they had concerns with Powder House and the wetlands there. There is, the Affordable Housing Trust is doing a land survey there right now. I don't know for what development, but you mentioned that as well.
Okay, thank you. And we all did get that, the entirety of that email. Thank you. Okay, other people we haven't heard from on this section? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next section, which is the off-street parking. Section 4.6, and I'm sorry, the packets are a little bit out of order, but use the line numbers. Mark.
Yes, so section 9.4.6, off-street parking, these are the requirements for off-street parking. In the Beaver Dam district, we have increased our regular parking requirements to 2 spaces per residential unit. That's primarily because it is not in really a walking distance to anything else. So those people would have at least 1, if not 2 cars. And then in the rest of the community, we kept with our current requirement of 1.5 spaces per unit, so that is consistent with zoning. We added a little section for bicycle storage saying that in multifamily developments, 25 or more, the board can require that adequate bike storage be available. So, and that primarily would apply to the Beaver Dam district.
Okay. Any comments on the parking requirements, which are the same as our underlying zoning with the exception of Beaver Dam Road? Okay. Site plan review, we just talked about that. Mark, anything else that you want to add, or Emily, on that portion, because it is a confusing section.
It just lays out the site plan review process, refers to our current design standards as well as the newly adopted design standards. So again, it's not just the design standards that you see here that they have to comply with. They have to comply with the design standards that are in our current zoning bylaw as well, and go through the design review process. So,
okay. The other thing I just wanted, there was a question about the process, and this section references our existing site plan review process and procedures. So that question is answered here. We have an existing site plan review processes reference in these sections. And did those section numbers get properly vetted? I'll double check. Okay.
yeah, you had a question over there.
Sandy, go ahead.
Does the existing site plan review process require notification of abutters? My understanding is it does.
It does.
The site plan review process?
Yes.
That's usually linked to a special permit.
It's, in our bylaw says a site plan review may receive a public hearing from the planning board.
Right, but I don't think we require in site plan a butters list.
I don't know what to say.
Yes or no?
Yeah, yes or no? I mean, Mark, is it yes or no? My understanding is site plan does not, special permit does.
Planning board shall hold a public hearing for consideration of application for site plan approval. The first sentence in our current zoning 12.6.3.
You have notification.
But do we notify?
Well, a public hearing shall be held in accordance with the procedures set forth in Mass General Law, Section 40A11.
Is that a notification?
So that, yeah, so that's the requirement for special permits, which is a notification of butter.
Okay, so just to be sure I'm clear, so it does require notification?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about the design review, committee, briefly, starts on section 151. The design review process, go ahead.
Oh, okay, so the planning board, for the review of the building design, can appoint a design review committee, which consists of 3 members, 2 of which will be from the architectural or not necessarily architects, but design professionals of some type, as well as a planning board member, and they shall review the building design for conformance and make recommendations, work with the developer if they want to tweak, feel it needs some adjustments, and then make a recommendation to the planning board on the final design. So there is a process for review of the architecture of the building.
Okay. Any comments from the public on the design review process or site plan review process? Turning down the heat in here. I'm not seeing any comments on. Okay, the development standards, 9.4.8. Can I just summarize those for us, please?
So these are just some general development standards referring to that they have to comply with the process of site plan review and the designs, the current design, the site plan review design process in our zoning bylaw, which is section 9.4. You also have to comply with not the special permit, but you have to, this is the section where it requires that you meet the criteria of things like your removal, flood control in our water resource protection district.
Sarah?
It was my understanding a change was going to be made, lines 225 to 227 to remove the planning board's right to reduce the required parking by no more than 20%. During the site plan review, the planning board may reduce the required parking by no more than 20%. I thought that was going to be eliminated.
That was your suggestion. Yes. So I think
due to resident input.
Yep. So Sarah has recommended deleting 225 to 227 during a site plan review. The planning board may reduce the required parking by no more than 20%.
And I think the reason I suggested that was because there were people on Pine Street that were concerned that if the parking was waived, that people would park on the streets. It's a major road and it's not good for on-street parking. Whereas if you require it on site, you would alleviate that parking issue.
Okay.
I agree with that. I think we shouldn't waive. We're only in that district requiring 1.5 cars per unit, and just from the number of each stickers we send out, we have like 2.5 cars per household currently, so it's safe to assume we're gonna have 2 cars per new household, and the overflow goes to the street, so if we can lessen that, I think that makes sense. I would recommend taking that out as well.
Okay, any other comments or public comment? Christine, I see a hand up. Do you have a comment on the parking?
On these development standards, I have a comment.
Okay, great. Go ahead. Thank you.
Christine Delisio, 6 Lincoln Avenue. My question is, could you just outline what out of these are waivable and which ones are actually required for strict performance?
Emily or Jonathan, these are standards, and maybe you can help us understand how they get applied.
So the standards actually mostly point to your existing bylaws, the standards in your existing bylaws. Looking at the general development standards, we do not have a waiver in there. I'm just double checking the architectural standards. I believe we took that. Okay, so the waiver was, okay, we do allow it. So they can require, they can waive the requirements of 9.49 general development standards in the interest of design flexibility and overall project quality, and upon a finding of consistency of such variation with the overall purpose and objectives of the CHOD. And what that would mean is that during the site plan review process, which does allow for that public public hearing, the planning board, if they found that there was something in these development standards that was preventing a development that would happen or requiring it to be a less good development than it could be, has the authority to waive those to allow for a better design. You sometimes see that if you're talking about a lot that has sort of an unusual configuration and the strict letter of the development standards, not the dimensional standards. And I want to make that very clear. The waiver is not for the dimensional standards. You can't waive the height, you can't waive the setbacks or any of those other things. It's more with the development standards in terms of the materials, because it includes the design guide. Oh, I'm glad you asked that question. General development standards are 9.4.8. The design guidelines are 9.4.9. I think the intent was to allow for a waiver of the design guidelines because the waiver is in the design guidelines section. So given that, if the planning board agrees, this section, 9.4.8, general development standards cannot be waived. It's the design guidelines in 9.4.9 that can be waived. I think that reference to development standards didn't get caught when we did the division into 2 separate sections.
So what line are we changing?
It would be 514. To change that, I would recommend to change that to design guidelines, section 9.4.9 design guidelines.
This section, so that remove the period after the number 9. Is that right?
No, it would be 514 of this section, 9.4.9 period, replace general development standards with design guidelines.
Okay.
What line number?
Line 514.
It's unfortunately the stapling is out of order.
Okay,
the site plan review authority may waive the requirements of this section.
9.4.9.
Yes.
The section number is correct. The description should be design guidelines.
Oh, so does that, so delete general development standards?
Exactly.
And say, so it should be comma.
No comma,
No
just
okay.
point, because it's section 9.4. Yeah, actually,
I said point.
0.9. Design guidelines. We split the section into 2 and it wasn't caught.
But we allow waiving all or any standards in 6.3.13, and if we're referencing our site plan in our regular bylaw, and by that default, we're allowed to waive.
Under your current bylaw, yes,
Right.
but we're not adding a new section in here for the development standards, just for the design guidelines. So you have the permissions of your current bylaw.
So I
in
think,
terms of
and
waivers.
she could correct, but I think part of the question was, with that being in here, and maybe not here, but how much are we able to waive?
The limitation of your current bylaw at that
Right.
point, so, yes. So no change, in other words, to your current practice, yeah. Okay.
So I want them clear, anything can be waived. I just want to make sure that abundantly clear. Our current guidelines basically say anything can be waived.
I think
There are
there's
dimensional requirements.
Hold on, maybe Jonathan can help us, but I think our current waiver has specific criteria.
Right, in order, these waivers here that we're talking about in 512 to 516 requires a particular finding by the board in order to issue the waiver. To the extent that there's a waiver under the normal site plan review process, and I apologize, I don't have that in front of me, but yeah, there's existing language in your existing site plan review process to issue waivers, but those also require specific findings.
Right.
So the process would be the same.
Yeah, whereas it's not inconsistent with public health and safety, and where such waiver does not derogate from the purpose of the section.
Right.
So I guess it's public health and safety.
And the purpose of the section, which is
Site plan review
Which
and
is-
this.
which is bigger than health and safety. Aesthetics, landscape, emergency, the views and vistas, other noise, those are standards that are in that section.
And again, you have the existing waiver for the development standards. You have the waiver that we're proposing for the design standards. You do not have a waiver for dimensional standards. You do not have a waiver for parking if you take out that 20%.
Okay. Any other comments on the design standards section? Christine, do you have another comment?
Sorry, I was on mute, sorry. Follow up with this. Why was views and vistas taken out?
It's not. It was, we did not specifically exclude views and vistas. So if you look at section 6, if you look at line 228C, performance standards, it's section 6.3, performance standards for special permits and site plan review shall apply to all developments under the section 9.4 that are required to undergo site plan review. The following components of this section do not apply, and views and vistas are not listed in the sections that do not apply, so it would still
So
apply.
views and vistas remain among the criteria.
Views and vistas is in 6.3.9.
Oh, hang on. I'm sorry, I thought it was a separate one. I think because it's covered in the design guidelines. We took out the aesthetic standards because we were adding a new set of design guidelines.
So are the design guidelines addressing view sheds?
Would you add view sheds to the design guidelines? We have integration. I'm checking because the design guidelines are quite extensive.
Yeah, I mean, I just know that's a big, obvious deal for people that if height is being increased and it's blocking their sunlight or view, that can be obviously upsetting to abutters.
It is under 6.3.9 aesthetic standards. So it does talk about views, existing scenic view sheds shall be preserved or enhanced by the proposed development. So.
But didn't we take that out?
No, this was in the current zone.
We did, we took aesthetic standards out because we were replacing it with design guidelines.
So just to clarify Mary's scenario, that scenario, if my neighbor builds something in front of my view today, that's not, I don't have a protected right for that. I think the views that are in our special permit are about sort of the larger macro view of large development. So I'm not sure it's
Yes.
of the same, they're two different things.
So the criteria that are in the section we were just talking about, the ones that were specifically excluded are because they were part of the site plan, the special permit process, where you do have that public benefit in there. And Jonathan can jump in at any point. And so the aesthetic standards that were in there were more towards the special permit type. The design guidelines were intended in much more specific level to substitute for those under the site plan review and your new design review, which you didn't have before.
So maybe we should consider putting back in 6.3.9, so that during site plan, we do review for people who sheds and.
Madam Chair, so 6.3.9, correct me if I'm wrong, at 261, 262, says shall apply to all developments under this section 9.4 that are required to undergo site plan review. So the board,
We accepted the following components on 231.
231.
Yeah, the following components of this section do not apply. I hear absolutely that the concern is about view sheds. I would recommend putting them into the design guidelines of this zoning so that they're part of the overall design review. And then that recommendation comes back to the planning board as part of the site plan review, rather than having them separated out from the other design components.
And I appreciate you wanting to put them back in. I think that should fall under the planning board and not an appointed site committee that's reviewing more architectural detail of buildings. They don't have to have a public hearing, the design guideline committee, and the planning board does.
But their recommendation is advisory to you, so it would be up to the planning board anyway, and the final vote on the site plan review is up to the planning board. So they could include the view sheds as part of their overall review.
So you're suggesting that a committee have 6.3.9 added to their guidelines, and they review a bylaw?
I was going to suggest that it be added to 9.4.9, just because, only because the rest of the design guidelines are there. But it's entirely up to the board. If you feel that just reinstating it in that section, I'm fine with that too, unless there's a.
in design already, 261, 262.
Oh.
It's in
Thank you, Jonathan. I was looking at the wrong line. You're absolutely right. It's in there. We just moved it under design guidelines already. I'm so sorry, I misheard you, Jonathan.
No, yeah, so correct me if the process-wise, because these are under design guidelines, so they would, at the first level, get a review by the committee, who would make an advisory report to the planning board as the site plan review authority, and then you all could take their advisory opinion into account, could, give it weight, not discount it, whatever you want. You still get the ultimate authority to issue the site plan decision, but they just get the first bite at the apple to say, we took a first look at it, this is our thought.
Yeah.
Okay, is it confusing to take it out on one page and then the next page put it back in?
I think it was, I'm happy that I was consistent to my recommendations, but I think that's actually why we did it, was to bring the aesthetic components into the design review so they'd be all together.
Yeah, I don't think you need to make any changes.
Yeah.
Okay. I will stand by my point that I don't think that is a appointed committee role to enforce a site plan bylaw.
But
they're not enforcing anything, they're just.
Well, I used the wrong word, enforce, not to review a regulatory, well, not even regulatory, because site plan isn't regulatory. So.
Okay, let's, any other, I think we have worked our way through the entire zoning.
Affordability.
Affordability, oh, I'm sorry. Well, let's see, what section are we? Affordability, Mark. Sorry. Starting on line 520.
One thing, but 520.
Let's do affordability and then come back to you.
4.10.
Yep, so, this section basically requires that affordable units shall meet the requirements so that they can be placed on the subsidized housing inventory. And this is also the section that requires the 20% affordable, and it also requires that the units shall be integrated into the overall development and not be substantially inferior to the other units. Yeah, and payment in lieu of providing a unit is not allowed. That you actually have to want to build 5 units, let's say, in a district that allows you to build 5 units. One of those 5 have to be an affordable unit. That would be 20%.
Okay. Do we have any questions on this section?
Can I just point out that line 544 to 548 was supposed to be deleted?
Oh. 554 to
544?
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question of the planner?
All right.
Did HLC approve the EFA?
They did not have the EFA at the time of the submittal of our thing,
So I would recommend keeping this in just in case HLC comes back with a negative determination or a lower determination on your approval of the economic feasibility analysis. You want to have at least 10% affordable. So I would say keep it in at the moment.
Oh, okay, so we might, so this is like with the underlying zoning, this might come back and say,
So when it comes to the affordability requirement, 10% is the maximum unless you get an approved economic feasibility analysis in which you could go up to 20%. So it's my understanding that you all got an EFA of 20%. But what we don't know, and Emily might be able to correct me, the other communities that I'm doing this with haven't received an EFA approval yet. I don't know if anyone has.
Thought I'd heard of one.
Yes,
Yes,
So there's, I think they're not very quick about it. We don't know what they're doing with them. So this is bootstrap language that I've recommended to say, to the extent that in the rare circumstance or whatever circumstance it turns out to be that HLC says we're not approving your 20%, this whole affordability requirement doesn't go away. We at least maintain the 10%. But if HLC comes back with, yes, we approve your 20%, then this is fine.
okay. And then the analysis that we got, because doesn't EOHLC require real life examples?
Yeah.
Yeah, did it include that?
Yeah,
Yes.
just looking at what, so the consultant on that was RKG Associates Substats. And I believe they included real life analysis. They've been doing a lot of the EFAs, so they're pretty consistent with the format.
Okay. Any comments on the affordability section? Okay. What I'm going to do is summarize the amendments, I hope. And I'm going to, so this is, go ahead.
Are we going to discuss the amendments?
Yeah, I'm going to try to summarize the amendments. The first is to delete lines.
Line 85 to 91.
85 to 91 is the first one. That's the special permit for accessory uses.
Yes.
106.
Then remove
Okay.
106 to 107, the language that where it says require a special permit from the planning board and shall. Just
Yeah.
remove those words.
Language from 106, 107.
And on line 120, it says a comma after living.
I don't think we have a big
More of a Scribner's
discussion.
thing. Want to be complete. Line 125 to 128, we want to remove section 9.4.5.8, which is the structured parking section.
Point eight?
Number eight, lines 125 to 128.
That's,
We had a change on.
And then the
225.
yeah, we're gonna remove line 225 to 227.
Right, the
Where
waiver.
it starts during site plan review, the planning board will reduce the required parking by no more than 20%. Remove that last sentence.
I think that was it.
I think that's all.
Nope, one
One
more.
more.
Which one?
Oh,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
514, strike general development standards
Oh, yes.
and replace with design guidelines.
And there's also 580 through 582.
And we decide we're gonna leave that.
You might want, do you want, not want to keep the definition, just.
Oh, right, then, I'm sorry, I skipped over addition of definitions in section 2.
And it just
I
adds
think-
it to your.
Yeah, just adds it to our general definition. If we want it in the future.
And just note, there is a design standard for structured parking, which Mark suggested we remove. I suggest you might want to keep it in case there is ever a special permit request, that design standard. It's not allowed otherwise, so it's not doing any harm there, but just a thought.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask if there's discussion on any of those, Laura?
Yeah, can we go through them all?
Well, let's start with, Laura had a question on one of them.
I have a question. Was it time to discuss the amendments?
Yes.
At this point? Discussion on the waiver of the parking.
Lines 225 to
Line
227.
225, yeah, taking that jurisdiction from the planning board, given that we also, in the table at line 134, require the fractionalized spaces to be rounded up to the next door number. I think we could do those two things combined. Take some of the flexibility from the planning board to be sensitive to lot development, wanting to limit the lot coverage of surface parking if it's appropriate during the course of site plan review. I think it makes sense for the planning board to have that discretion. And given that parking is not just about impervious surfaces or pervious surface, it's also about tree cover and other things that contribute to the overall character of the town, built infrastructure. Just have it on paper, not straight.
Sarah, you want to just comment on that at all?
Yes, I think that I received numerous comments from residents concerned that if the parking was not enforced off-street, that the streets being selected, such as Pine Street, Summer Street between Allen and Lincoln Street, are both major arteries. And if you don't force the parking off-street, then you're creating an on-street parking problem, and we already have on-street parking problems in the downtown area of Manchester.
Agreed.
I would say that in the interest of, and as we have been, listening to public comment and making adjustments, not only to the language, but to the maps as we've had our hearings and public forums, that it's from technically a site design perspective, it'd be nice to have that flexibility. But I think in listening to the public, it's one of those things where I think it's important that we make adjustments to reflect concerns people have moving forward.
Okay, in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is I think, well, first of all, before I close that out, Sue, do you have any comments that I haven't had a chance to hear from? Sue Filbert?
No.
Okay.
Forget about her.
Okay, she's in a different time zone. Okay, so I'm going to actually take a vote on each of these. Anne?
I just like to add my perspective, the things that we can take out to make this easier for people to accept. And I recognize that tree cover is important, but at the moment, getting this passed, and in the site plan review, there will be opportunities to work with the developers on minimizing the disruption caused by the park.
Okay, thank you. I think what I'm going to do is take the recommendation of the board. We still have the hearing open, and we still have a lot of work to do tonight. So in the interest of keeping this moving, I'm going to take a motion to remove, I'm going to just we're going to vote these one at a time so that I think that we've heard the arguments. The waiver of parking remove section, lines 225 to 227. Do I have a motion to do that?
So moved.
Do a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sue?
Yes.
And opposed?
I'm an abstain. I hear the arguments on both sides.
That's fine. Okay, so that one will pass. Next one is to delete lines 85 to 80. That is the special permit for home occupation and accessory uses. Do I have a motion to do that?
I'll move that as well.
Chris Alney moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Gordon Brewster seconds. Discussion?
So, I just have different numbers. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
That's voted by all. The next one is to delete, I'm not necessarily going in logical order, I apologize, 106. I'm just trying to get to a version that we can hold on. To the line that the shall require a special permit from the planning board and in 106 and 107. Do I have a motion to
So
remove
move
that?
one as well.
And
Brewster
second, Gordon Brewster seconds. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, that's passed 7-0. And then,
Are you striking living in on one of these?
sorry, they were just liking the period.
Oh,
I
just
mean, the comma. I think that one's an editorial. I'm going to take that as editorial. 125 to 128, the removing of structured parking.
So moved.
Chris Alney moves and Gordon seconds, and I'm going to just make a comment that I do think that we should put on our future list to modify the table in the section 4 table in the LCD in a future time. Okay, any other discussion?
What line are you looking at again?
This is 125 to 128, removing the structured parking allowed. Okay, any other discussion? Board? All in favor?
Aye.
7-0, thank you. And 544 to 548, we're leaving that. That's the affordable housing, right? Does anybody want to make a motion?
Is my
514.
514, sorry. 514, I'm going to take that. Can we take that as an editorial change? Well, okay, make the change on 514, changing general development standards to design guidelines. Moved and second, Olney moves and Brewster seconds. Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
All, I'm sorry, Mary, did you vote on that one? Okay, 7 voting in favor. And then 544.
You get 225,
I did, yep. 544, recommendation is to leave the 544 to 548, the about, it would revert to 10% if our study was not approved. Does anybody object to that and want to make a motion to strike that? Hearing no motion, I will leave it as it stands. Okay, so that is the zoning. Yes, go ahead. Okay. Which one?
Yeah,
Yeah, we can waiver parking. Waiver. Oh, you're good? Okay.
Yeah, that was the first one.
That's the first one. I took them out of order. Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, Alan Wilson, go ahead.
I just had a question in the vote on 9.4.4.3. I think I heard deleting lines 85 to 87. That wouldn't be correct.
85 to 91.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just misheard it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have.
Sarah Pierce has her hand up.
There are 2 more things we're going to do. We're going to vote to recommend to the board of the select board that we put this on the warrant, and then we're going to hear about the
Don't you want to close the public hearing?
Could I ask a question before you close the public hearing? I have 2 questions. I have 2 questions that I've been waiting to ask the consultant personally, because she hasn't been here for a few months.
Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, I'd like to know where it is written in the law that if the town votes this down, that the state has the right to come in and zone for us.
It's not in the law.
Not in the law. Okay, well, that has been repeatedly said throughout every public forum that the task force has presented to residents.
Can I answer
So that, sorry?
I can try to answer that. It's not in the law, but in the complaint that the state filed against the town of Milton, they asked for certain remedies. One of the remedies was...
Okay, but I'm asking about the law. We're not going to use Milton in our favor now, okay? This is something that has been used as a tactic by the task force over and over again.
Okay,
Secondly,
Sarah,
well,
I think you got your
I would
answer.
also-
I'm going to ask
I
Jonathan.
don't want an answer from Chris. I wanted one from Emily.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment on that. I'm going to ask Jonathan to clarify that whether one of the remedies what asked by the AG.
And I just would like to ask my other question when
hold
you're
on.
finished.
Let's hear from Jonathan Murray, please.
Thank you.
One of the remedies requested by the Attorney General could be, if the court allows it, to allow the state to have some say in zoning for local municipalities. So I would agree with the member's statement.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, you have one more comment?
Yeah, just to follow up with Chris's, it's a recommendation. It's not written into the law. But then I would also like to just clarify, in the letter from the EOHLC, it does state several times that Manchester, whether it's built or not, has been issued to be able to build 559 units over 37 acres. So I just don't know, and 15 units per acre. So I don't know how our local zoning takes over the state's zoning, and also as this is by right. So it's confusing to the public. So even if we don't build them, we have the potential to build 559 units. And I would just wonder if Emily could weigh in on that, if allowed, could be built.
With your permission, I'm happy to discuss the requirements from HLC. So in the compliance guidelines, if you go to HLC's website, they have the compliance guidelines. Each city and town of the 177 has certain requirements. And those requirements include a geographic area and a unit capacity that is different for each town. It's based partly on their designations. Are they a rapid transit? Are they a commuter rail? Are they adjacent? And it's also based on their 2020 units, housing units. So the 2020 is reference to the US Census and the housing units that they had there. And there's a mathematical calculation and the guidelines go into it. So the numbers that HLC are referring to are the requirements for Manchester to demonstrate that the zoning has a capacity, that's a unit capacity of a certain number of units. Has to meet a geographic requirement of a certain number of acres. Mark alluded to earlier that a percentage of those acres and a percentage of those units have to be within the station area, which is the half mile from the station area. What HLC was talking about in that letter is they had originally made a mistake in the requirements. So if you go back to some early task force meetings and some early meetings when I first joined, there was a discussion back and forth of which numbers applied. They were just confirming which numbers applied. I do want to stress for people that the unit capacity is the amount that is calculated by the compliance model, which is a GIS, Geographic Information Systems, and Excel-based calculation model. It is not a production target, so the town is not required to produce that number of units. And in fact, the private market is not required to produce that number of units. It is a calculation designed to understand whether or not the town has passed zoning that is sufficiently compliant. And one of the measures is that unit capacity. So I hope that helps.
Great, thank you.
It definitely does help. Just to follow up, I do have a letter in front of me, and it says number 4, we acknowledge that a data error occurred, caused EOHLC publications or tools to incorrectly list the town's minimum required unit capacity as 585 units. The correct number, as previously stated, is 559 units.
Yes.
So where this letter is being issued by the state, I'm just wondering what kind of recourse do we have if, in fact, the land allows for 559 units to be developed?
I think it's a short answer. It's the compliance model is the smaller number.
Right. The unit capacity that you are required to show is the 559. So that's just that number I mentioned earlier. That's within the model. All that letter is doing is confirming that it's 559 and not the higher number.
Okay. So the
Thank you,
compliance
Sarah.
model is in the 300s. Well, could you just confirm what the compliance model reflects?
It reflects that you are compliant under the lower number.
Which is what?
You have the most recent compliant model with you?
No.
Mark changed it since I last saw it.
Is it like 300 something?
I would follow up with Mark. Oh, there you go.
No,
That's that
it
slide that I
is-
had.
It is,
So is she asking what's the future units?
yeah, what's,
Are you asking
what does
net
the number
new or
of units
I
show?
think it's 352.
It says,
She's asking that new, I think.
So it modeled for 586. Possible future units is 352.
Okay, so thank you, Mary. The 352
Okay,
number
thank you. So
is
it's
the
not
net
like
new.
34 or something like that. It's 352. Okay, great. Thank you
I'm going
so
to
much.
take a motion now to close the public hearing. The board will still have time to, Beth, is that my right next move? Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I move that we close the public hearing.
Walney moves, Brewster seconds. Roll call vote. Morton, yes. Foley, yes. Brewster, yes. Creighton, yes. Only yes, and Tenny, yes. Thank you. Sue.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay, so I am now gonna suggest a motion for the board to vote.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Sorry, one just reminder, in addition to making a vote on the recommendation of the article, I recommend that the board also make a separate vote that the overlay districts as proposed are eligible locations under the zoning act. And if you want me to read off that definition, I will. It goes to confirming the simple majority vote.
Okay. So my suggested motion was to ask the select board to place the following article on the warrant and to confirm that the districts as proposed meet the requirements,
Are eligible locations as defined under the zoning act.
are eligible locations under the zoning act.
As defined.
As defined under the zoning act. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll take a motion to ask the select board to place the following article on the warrant and he said.
Are we gonna get?
So I'll take a motion first and then we're gonna discuss the motion, so. Okay.
I'll make that motion.
All right. And Brewster's gonna second it, thank you. Okay, discussion.
Are we gonna get a revised copy to review?
I think we
Well, of course,
we will
yes.
get a
I have to-
revised
I have
copy
to
before the
revise
select
it
board.
and submit it with a memo to the select board and the maps so that they can place the amended version on the warrant.
And is the select board having a public hearing because, are they having a public hearing for 3A? Obviously, 3A goes beyond just the zoning bylaw. There's grants, there's financials, there's things that are in the select board venue. So are you guys having a public hearing?
No.
Why not?
Public hearing is the town meeting. So the board, there's no requirement to do an additional public hearing.
Right, this has been
beyond
noticed.
what you're doing here.
However, the task force is gonna have a public forum to discuss.
Yeah.
Forums and
Right, so
discussions.
that's
but it
more
won't be a
information.
formal public
Okay, we
hearing.
have a motion on the floor here, specific discussion around the motion. Any other discussion around the motion? We
that
will,
the motion right
after
there?
this, plus the determination that the zoning
Districts are eligible locations as defined under the zoning act.
are eligible locations as
Are we
defined in
having
the
a
zoning.
separate motion if we,
So then the second, we will take a second motion to recommend the article after we've heard from the reg and the FinCom and subsequent to this. So this is just to put it on the warrant,
so
okay?
Okay.
So
do we have to say though with the,
as
as
the
amended.
amended, right, the amended zoning as amended tonight. To see if. Okay.
Version dated October 28th. per
Version
your
dated,
notes.
right. Right, and to let's to see this, place the following article and to advance or to put the zoning bylaw amended October 28th.
Now, what is the number 6 as set forth 6 below?
Cut this from the
You're picking up some.
it's picking up some
line
stray
numbers. You got some stray
numbers.
numbers on the side.
Just trying to-
Stray numbers.
It's a page
So-
6.
Okay. If they put it on the warrant, the amended version tonight. Sorry, I was trying to do it in the middle.
6, 7, 5, yeah.
I'm sorry for my confusion. The eligible location can be in your recommendation. Yes.
Okay,
I apologize for that.
all right. So we're asking simply to put the amended version on the warrant. That is the motion. We will.
Yep.
Okay. Any other discussion about putting this on the warrant? Okay, I'll take a vote. Roll call vote. Chris Olney,
Yes.
Laura Tenney,
yes,
Gordon Brewster.
Yes.
Mary Foley,
no,
Peter Morton.
Yes.
Sue Philbrick.
Yes.
Sarah Creighton votes yes, 6-1, thank you. Okay, so next part of our meeting is to hear about 3 studies that I think we all have in our packet. I'll ask Sarah Melish just to summarize the fiscal analysis.
So the finance committee looked at a number of pieces of information. Obviously, if there was a specific project like there was for SLB, it's pretty easy for us to do. In this case, it is it's unknown how much development will actually happen. So we based our fiscal analysis on various pieces of information. One is propensity of change report prepared by RKG. One is the economic feasibility analysis prepared by RKG. Enrollment and budget information from the Manchester Essex Regional School District, and the Finance Committee financial analysis of the SLV Shingle Place Hill. So basically, in looking at the RKG change report, they looked at the cost of acquisition and construction and post-construction value, and determined that it was financially feasible to only build 34 additional units within the CHODs inside of Route 128 or the downtown area, plus 100 at the Beaver Dam location. So we looked at the assessed value, Manchester assessed property value in fiscal year 20, and again in fiscal year 24. And the reason we did that is because for the Beaver Dam project, we're starting with the analysis made at SLV regarding assessments. And we needed to look and see how much the assessments had increased since fiscal year 20. And they've increased 35.4%. And the fiscal year 24 property tax rate was $9.35. And then we have auto excise tax of $25 a thousand. And we assumed that the value of a vehicle would be $15,000, tried to be conservative. And that the number of vehicles would be equal to the number of required parking spaces. So we did two calculations. Oh, and the other piece of information is that today we have 2,433 existing housing units, which is the number certified in the information from the state regarding this Communities Housing Act and the compliance module. 75% of those are single family, 10% are 2 or 3 family, and 15% are apartments. For the regional school district, the enrollment information they provided us with pre-certified October 1, 24 enrollments. They knew what the number was, but they have not yet sent it to the state certification because they gave it to me before 10/1. And so the number of Manchester students in the school district as of 10/1/24 is 651. On 10/1/20, there were 823 Manchester students in the school district, which is a decrease of 172 over 4 years, or 21%, an average of 43 students a year. Based on the fiscal year 25 operating budget of $16.3 million, it costs us $25,099 per student, and if you include the capital budget, it goes up to $29,279. Looking at the existing number of housing units and the existing number of students, we determined that 27% of the units have a child in the school district. In addition, we looked at a study completed for the Essex Elementary School, dated June 24th, 24, and they did an enrollment study, and in that study, they projected that there would be no increase in the school population over the next 10 years. That's as far out as they went. Then looking at the FinCom SLV analysis, when they did that analysis, it was during the LIP project, so it was when there were 157 units projected, and it had an estimated value of a little over 46 million. If it also assumed that 31.8% of the units would have school-age children, which was consistent with the numbers back in fiscal year 20. So what we did in assuming the assessed value of the units within the downtown area, we estimated 1,500 square feet per unit. If you have a 6,000 square foot lot and you use the 40% coverage and create 3 units, 2 of those units would be 2,400 square feet. So the 1,500 is not outlandishly large. And we used an assessed value from Sawmill Circle, which is the most recent multifamily housing in Manchester. And that was $350 a square foot, which comes up with an assessed value of $525,000 for each unit within the downtown area. So then if we calculate that out based on the last year's property tax rate, and then do the CPC tax calculation, and do the auto excise tax calculation at the number of parking spaces, we came up with taxes per unit of about $5,500 per unit. And then we did two calculations. One calculation was assuming the 34 new units based on the propensity for change, and the other was the total build-out units, which the number we had then is different than the number we have now. So that was 224 units. And so with the 34 units, it would be annual income of $188,000. With the 224, it would be $1.2 million. Then we did the calculation for Beaver Dam based on the SLV analysis we had done. And so Beaver Dam is 63.7% of the size of SLV. We just, Beaver Dam could be housing for the elderly. It could be anything, but we just said, okay, let's assume it's something similar SLV. So therefore, taking that original assessment, increasing it by the 35.4% increase in the last 4 years, we come up with an assessment of $39.6 million. And property taxes and auto excise tax, assuming 2 parking spaces per unit. For the 100 units, it comes up with estimated total taxes of $451,000. So when we add that to the 34 unit calc, it comes up with a total of $639,000. If we add it to the 224 units, it comes up to $1.7 million. And then we looked at it realistically and said, it's reasonable that this development would probably spread over 20 years. For instance, Blyman Circle took 10 years to build out, and that's what, 10 or 12 properties. So if we spread it over 20 years, it would be an annual increased revenue of between $32,000 and $85,000. Not a huge amount. And then we looked at the school district impact. And if we use the number 27% of the units might have a child, for the 134 units, it would come up with 36 students. The finance committee wanted to be conservative in case there were younger families, so they upped it to 50 potential students, which happens to be the same number they used for SLV. So they didn't really think about that when they came up with the 50. And so then so that would be the 134 units. If you look at the total build out units, it would be about 90 potential school age children. So we're talking between 50 and 90. If you look at the per student cost, that would be between 1.2 million and 2.3 million. However, we didn't feel that calculation was realistic because not only have we lost the 172 Manchester students, we also have over 80 school choice students. And theoretically, the school choice students, they come from other districts and they're to fill open spots. So theoretically, it doesn't cost us money. They're just adding a student to fill out a classroom. And on that, we receive $5,000 from the state for each school choice student. So then we looked at the impact on town services, and we looked at the percentage of new units to the existing dwellings. And under the 134 units, it would be 5.5%. Under the 324 units, it's 13.3%, which spread over 20 years would be 7 to 16 new dwelling units per year, which is 0.3% to 0.6% 7%. So we didn't feel the additional units would have a direct impact on the town budgets, but we decided to be conservative and do a calculation. Water and sewer, since the water and sewer rates are set by the select board to cover the expenses, we assumed there were no additional expenses for water and sewer, and the DPW advised us that there is sufficient capacity in water and sewer to cover this new development. In addition, the law allows us to deny a building permit if there's insufficient infrastructure. So you always have that in your back pocket. So what we did is we took 5.5% and 13.3% for the 2 points for DPW, public safety, and general government as far as the fiscal year 25 budget. And we said potentially it could cost us that. We don't think it will, but we decided to include that number. So that cost would range from 510,000 for 134 units to 102 million. And over 20 years, it would be 25,000 to 62,000. Then we looked at grants. In fiscal year 24, the town had 4.2 million in grants. 3.5 was that Mass Works to do the water and sewer. The town's 25-year capital plan identifies about $250 million in capital projects for infrastructure for the town of Manchester. Water and sewer, climate and storm resiliency. And the town does plan to seek assistance through grants. We feel fewer grants may be available to non-compliant communities, increasing the tax burden to town residents. And every 300,000 in grants equals 1% on the tax rate. And the other thing is affordable housing projects rely on state aid and state and federal low housing tax credits for 80 to 90% of the cost of their developments. 30% for the grants and 50 to 60% in tax credits. And the funding is controlled by EOHLC, which is the same entity controlling the Community Housing Act. So without this funding, there won't be affordable housing projects built in Manchester because the developers won't be able to get any money. So that's just kind of another aside. So we took the revenue numbers, we subtracted out the cost to the town, we subtracted out the lost school choice, 67% of the lost school choice of revenue to the schools, because that's our apportionate piece. And we had, for the 134 units over the entire building cycle, a cost to the town of about 38,000, and for the 324 units, benefit to the town of 189,000. In addition, over the projected full build out, we projected a loss of grants of between 20 and 40 million. So then we said, okay, let's take those gross numbers and say, if the development were to occur over 20 years, what would it mean per year? And so in that case, the smaller number would cost the town about 2,000 a year, and the larger number would benefit the town about 9,000 a year. And if we lost $2 to $4 million worth of grants a year, it would represent a potential tax increase per year of 6.7% to 13.3%. So that's, and as I said, we assumed no impact, no additional cost for the school district because of the huge loss in enrollment.
Thank you very much.
So that's where we came out.
Your consulting fee will be in the mail.
It was very painful.
And I believe the finance committee, did they make a recommendation as well? They voted to recommend.
Yes, by a vote of 5-2
Vote to recommend.
to recommend the warrant article.
Thank you.
So I have
okay.
a lot of questions on this.
So before we do that, let's just finish this whole thing out. Greg, did you have any additional information about grants that you wanted to share?
Certainly can.
Okay,
If you'd like to hear
that'd be
it.
great. Yeah, I'd like to just get all this out on the.
Obviously, Sarah went over a lot of numbers, and just to remind people, those, you don't have to memorize them tonight.
Right.
The report is online under the MBTA zoning.
Under the studies section.
The study is
Study
there.
section, thank you.
So, people can take a deeper dive onto it from there. So a lot of discussion in town about grants and how much and which ones qualify, which ones don't. It's an imperfect science because the state is not definitive in which ones may or may not in the future. So it's a bit of a guessing game. The law had four specific grant sources that would identify. MassWorks, Housing Choice, the local capital, and what's the fourth one?
Housing
Choice.
Housing choice.
Housing
Housing
choice
works
and
and
Housing works and housing choice, yeah, yes. In addition, then the guidelines that had most recently modified, I think, had a dozen or so additional grant sources. So I can talk about 3 different categories of grants. If I look at just the 4 in the law, over the last 10 years, we received $6.2 million worth of grant money. Over the 10 years, those 4 specific categories. If I broaden the categories to include the 12 or so that were in the guidelines, that 6.2 goes to 8.3 rounded. Again, over a 10-year period. So can you argue, well, that 8.3 is exaggerated because you don't have confirmation that every one of those might have been denied? Fair enough. It's somewhere between 6.2 and 8.3 that we have earned that would be subject to elimination if we are not in compliance. And then the third number is just total grants, all said and done. So if you look at 10-year period, that number is just north of 20 million. So that includes federal grants. That's not that's not subject to 3A compliance. But some people have asked me, well, what's the bottom line number for total number of grants? So that's the number. So 3 buckets, over 20 million in total grants over 10 years. If you look at just the 4 grants that are in the law over 10 years, that's 6.2. And if you expand that to what's in the guidelines, that goes to 8.3. Again, over a 10-year period. Again, we can debate the fine-tuning of that number. We don't have perfect data. We often don't have perfect data. We often have to make decisions with imperfect data. But that's the best that we've been able to determine based on guidelines and based on agencies that come under those various guidelines.
How about future grants, Greg?
Future grants, so that's in the hopper right now. We have a library grant that's pending. They've delayed that announcement waiting until the first of the year because they want to know who's in compliance and who isn't. So that is a design grant initially at $150,000, and then if we were awarded $150,000, it would allow us for up to $3 million in construction money. We have in line to apply to the Seaport Economic Council, which is part of MassWorks, so it's part of the 4. And we have a anticipated $2 million to $2.5 million grant request for dredging, and then another $1 million for Tux Point.
The rotunda.
I'm sorry?
Is that the rotunda?
The rotunda, yes. Yeah, the rotunda. We'll also be seeking just under 2 million in CZM money for the rotunda. That's in that group of 13 or 12. It's not technically in the group of 4, but the state has included it in the group of, in the guideline. So in the next year or so, there's multi-millions in that. 4 or 5 million.
Can you just clarify the 6.2, what that made up of? 'Cause, I know the 3.5, and I know we did 500,000 dredging and 100,000
Housing choice.
sewer commission. So I don't know what makes up the other.
SEC money, Seaport Economic Council money.
Which one does that fall under?
Under MassWorks. Those are considered MassWorks funds.
Okay, so the state shifted that.
I'm sorry?
Did the state shift that under MassWorks from prior?
No, they didn't
funds?
shift it. They said it's always been under MassWorks.
Okay, because I know when we did when you and I
Right.
back and forth, SEC.
But we didn't have all of the SEC money in there.
Okay, so that's recent grants.
I'm sorry?
That's recent grants, SEC?
No, that dates back to 10 years.
Okay, because you and I have had emails back and forth. I'm just trying to get clarity so people can understand. And it was always just that 600,000 over the last 10 years, and then the 3.5 with the.
The 600,000 did not include the SEC funding.
Correct.
So that's the difference.
Yes, and that's why I'm wondering, where did it come into play that it is in the 4 bucket?
Because the state told us that SEC money is MassWorks money.
Okay, so I'm just saying, because a year ago, it had changed. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. So do you know when it changed?
I'm sorry, he answered that question, not me.
And he was looking at you.
No, because I wasn't involved with the conversation of confirming that the SEC grants were in there, so.
Okay, because I'm just saying, it must have changed within the last year, because, do you know when it changed?
I don't know when it changed. I certainly don't know, the background, but I know I work with the community on the South Shore, and just last week we got confirmation from the Seaport Economic Council that all of their grants are going to be contingent on, they're going to take 3A into compliance. So I don't know if there was a change or when it was, but I can confirm as of my email last week that it is a criteria that EOED is using.
Okay, so it seemed it shifted within the past year or two.
I don't know that to be candid.
Okay.
So
Thank
Greg,
you.
is that true, what you just said, that if we don't comply with 3A, then all that monies are in jeopardy for future monies?
Correct. You would not be able to apply for Seaport Economic Council monies. That has been really the driver of our harbor projects. That's been the major source of funding for us over the last 10 years in the harbor.
And that would extend to future monies too, that we
Correct.
don't even know about yet.
Correct.
Wow.
Well,
Wow.
so far it's just been for dredging, correct?
No. It's paid for Reed Park, it's paid for Morse Pier, it's paid for the docks at Tux Point. So if you look at what's on the website,
Yep.
the 10-year thing, if you look at all the SEC numbers,
Yep.
there was, I can read them to you if you like, but you can see.
No, I'm just saying, some of them say SEC, some don't, but that's fine.
They say Seaport Economic Council or SEC, one or the other.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. That's just a change, and
Let's keep, okay, so what I'd like to do now.
Can I ask for the financial analysis questions?
So what I was gonna suggest is we've sort of heard from our experts. And what I would suggest is that each board member, we have some questions, I guess we should get those answered. But I'd like to keep them. We'll take a few minutes to ask questions, and then what I was going to do is go around and allow each board member to give a statement about whether or not we should recommend passage of this article, and then we will take a vote to do that. My suggestion. So, Mary, why don't you ask some of your questions, and then.
Sarah.
Yes, ma'am.
I know you probably spent a lot of time on this, so thank you. I'm just going to start from the back page going forward, and I'll see what I can get through. So you have, I guess, just some basic numbers. You have full build out at 324 units, and it's 352.
Correct.
Okay, why?
Because the last number, the number the finance committee was provided was a 338 number minus the 14 units which were being removed from Pine Street. We were not provided with any additional units that
When
were
you
going to
started
be
the
done,
study.
when we worked on the study.
Okay, so these numbers will shift.
Yes.
Okay.
Which apparently will give more money to the town if the numbers are higher.
Can you, so I know you went, and I have a lot of questions with the school numbers. So basically if for your assessment comparing to SLV, which I don't think is a valid comparison, but you said that the taxes would be around $5,000 and it's $25,000 to educate a child. Correct?
Yeah, it's about 50, no. So the per unit in the downtown area was 5,500. But then in the 100, for.
So just to use round, like, let's even say 10,000 in taxes, right? Well, say you get 10,000 in taxes and it's 25,000 to educate a child. So that's 15,000 that then goes into the taxpayer bucket that needs to be covered, correct?
Well, no, because the assumption we made is that a 25,000 number is not realistic when you're looking at a decrease in the Manchester-only student population. I'm not looking at total in Manchester. A decrease in the last 4 years of 172 students, and then 82 school choice students that have been brought in to fill slots. If you don't bring in those school choice students and you use the new students from this development that's probably going to be spread over 20 years, so you're talking 5 or 9 students a year, then the only cost to the town is the 67% of the 5,000 per student they're losing from the state for school choice. That was the assumption we made.
But you know, once you take in school choice, you can't say, okay, now you have to leave. Like, you have to keep them through education.
Right, but we're expecting that we're not going to have 350 new units in a year.
Can I just add that the school choice students are spread over K through 12, so there's attrition.
There's about 1 or 2 in each grade. Yeah.
Mostly they're taking students in the 9th grade.
No. The number of students currently of school choice are spread over all the grades.
Okay. Right, but
And there's about 1 or 2 per grade at this point. Well, it's more than
But there
that.
is attrition, however it works out. May
But
not
it's
be
pretty even across every grade.
Okay.
That there
I
are
guess
school
my
choice.
overall point is, I don't agree with this development is going to happen over 20 years, but whatever. So let's just do a capture in time of today, and we've got the school choice kids, right?
Right.
Or let's do 2 years from
And
now.
we're at an average of 43 students a year we've lost over the last 4 years. And if you spread this development over 20 years, you're only talking 5 or 9 new students a year.
But a lot of the kids, my kids included, just leave the school system. We don't leave the town.
But
we
we're
leave the school
not
system.
paying for those students. The town isn't paying for those students.
Right. These are still tax dollars.
No, we're not paying for your students in private school. We don't pay, the town doesn't pay.
You sure?
Oh, I'm positive. I pay.
I know you don't pay for my private school, but.
So that doesn't cost, so all the students in private schools, for whatever reason.
Okay, let's try to keep going.
Right,
through.
no, my point being though is that we have to, when you do, my assumption is when we do school numbers, we take how many kids are in the town that are school age, not how many kids are in the school at that point in time,
That's not
right?
realistic.
So, but anyway.
That's not what the finance committee felt was realistic.
Okay, so we're gonna have a difference of opinion on that.
Can you tell me what makes up $20 to $40 million in grants?
That was an assumption we made based on the infrastructure needs of $250 million, including, climate resiliency, the fact that the state has put up about $300 or $350 million in matching money to secure more federal funds, which then they're going to allocate to the towns. And most grants in Massachusetts are discretionary. So even though a grant is not restricted in the law, the state can include noncompliance as a factor.
So
They
now
don't
all of
deny
this,
it, but it's a factor.
now all of a sudden, so with our projected 225 million plus or whatever it is, capital needs, we're gonna look for grant money
You've got,
to fund that?
you've got, not all of it, but
But
you've got Rockport, the money for the DPW garage.
No,
You've got other towns getting money for the public safety buildings.
No, I understand all that. I mean, the way I look at grants is it's a lottery. We can't say we're gonna get them. We have no idea. I mean, I take it down to my own home level. I don't say I'm gonna wait until I get a scratch ticket or win the lottery to repair my roof, right? Like,
This is what
we cannot budget based on
We felt
grants.
this was a reasonable assumption
Okay.
based on future town needs and the fact that over the last few years, the town has substantially increased pursuing grants.
Okay, so it's a guess at this point.
Oh, yeah.
It's a guess, okay. I know we went back and forth with the number of housing units, and I think I emailed this to Ann, because every report the town does, we have different housing unit numbers. We have the fiscal year 2025 budget book that says 2,100 households. We have the school numbers that calculate based on 2,100. I don't know what's certified by the state for 2,433 means.
2,433 were the numbers included in the 3A Community Act for the number of housing units that Manchester had in 2020.
Where did they get that? But, okay.
I don't know,
So,
Mary.
okay.
My job was to use certified information provided by the state and not to question it.
Okay, because I question, because they don't have the correct acreage in their modeling either for a lot of the lots. So
But I
that's
can tell you that the school numbers don't include any of the apartments, and we have over 300 apartments in town.
So what I did find is we have roughly 250 what the state calls vacant housing units, which I'm assuming means it's not a primary residence, right? So they don't have school kids here, they don't vote here. So I'm just questioning if we should just do a blanket, whether it's 2,400 or 2,300, right? Like, I think we
The
have
finance
to.
committee chose to include
Okay,
the units certified by the state.
okay, but we don't know how the state got it. Okay.
I don't-
What are the material?
What difference does it make?
So
Greg
and I appreciate,
Let Greg speak.
Yeah, Greg, you have the answer to this.
The state gets this from the assessor's data. The assessor's data currently shows us at 2552, I think the number is for
but
units.
I got the assessor's data.
Right,
and
that's
it
what
didn't.
she gave you.
Right, and those numbers did not match up.
But is
Well,
there a
what difference does it make?
material?
That was 4 years
So my
ago.
point-
That was 4 years ago.
You just sent it from 2024.
The state number is based on 2020.
Yeah, no, I know that.
So that's the difference.
I guess the question for you, Mary, is materially, when you,
So
if you
I-
take the higher of your numbers or the lower of your numbers, is there a material?
Yeah, I guess I just.
As opposed to trying to challenge.
Well, I'm
each of the
only
numbers.
challenging a few points because it's a lot of guesswork. And though I appreciate Sarah taking the time and doing this, I think this is why we asked from the beginning for the task force to do an independent financial consultant report.
We voted that the FinCom was going to do that, so that was your opinion, and we
No, it was
we
not,
voted
no,
that.
we voted the funds to get it done. But we voted at the beginning when we established the task force that is one of the things that would happen. It didn't happen. So here we are, and I just think that it's a lot to weigh on saying, guessing 20 million here, guessing 2.3, and saying to residents that this is
It's not a
reality.
guess. It's not numbers we picked out of the sky. It was reasonable estimates based on the future expected costs, reasonable estimates based on the expectation of how fast the development would occur based on past history. It was reasonable You don't have a project before you, you can't have definitive numbers.
And I understand that. I don't think 20 to 40 million is a reasonable guess. We've never in our lifetime of Manchester received 20 to 40 million in grants. So all of a sudden, we're going to be getting.
Is that over a 10-year
That's over
period?
20 years.
In the last 10 years, we've received over 20 million. And she's projecting 25 years, So a number of 40 million is very much in line with what we have already
In those
received.
4 buckets of the
We're
law?
projecting 2 to
I'm
4
not
million
saying
a
that.
year, Mary.
No one has.
Okay,
said
so
that
let's
before.
stop here. I want to just say that one of the other things is if we had had an independent consultant, they'd have gone to the FinCom and the assessor and Greg and gotten the numbers and made their own assumptions. Maybe they would have been different, maybe they would not. But this is the process we chose, and so we're grateful that the FinCom has spent all this time. Are there do you want to sort of present a material alternative besides the fact that you think that the grants are overstated? So that's your opinion. Are there another specific, rather than nitpicking the?
I don't, and
source
I'm not nitpicking Sarah. I know she probably spent a lot of time on it. I listened to the FinCom meeting. Unfortunately, the other FinCom members didn't have a chance to review it before
Yes,
they
they did.
voted on it.
Mary,
They got it right before the meeting,
no,
Sarah.
no, the FinCom members have had it since the beginning of October.
But then how other boards run themselves is not our.
Right,
And
and
they
so
gave
my point is that I think some of these numbers are not accurate. It's not an accurate reflection. I disagree that this is the route we decided to take. We decided at the beginning to have a financial impact analysis, and however many months later, it didn't happen. And then when the task force decided to try to make it happen, RKG or whoever else was not available. So we didn't decide this path.
We
It
did
was
vote to have the FinCom do this. We
at
absolutely
the,
took a vote.
after we had no other choice.
So
Yes,
here we are.
did. We did.
Do you have any other comments right now on these two?
What's the other document?
Well, the presentation, the grants you've made, and the income analysis.
No, I made my
Okay. So now what I'd like to do is I'm going to suggest a motion for the board, and then I'm going to ask each board member to speak on that. And so I'll share this. Hopefully I got language. John, you can help me. Shares. Oh, no, that's not the right share. Shares.
Are you taking questions from the public or no?
We're going to have a motion first, and then we're going to take we'll take some brief public comment. Is that sharing? Okay. So tell me if this is the right language, and I left it in draft mode. So the motion is to the planning board recommends passage of article that number to amend zoning to add section 9.4 and amend section 2 definition and the associated amendments to zoning maps in compliance with chapter 40 section 3A. The board finds the community housing overlay districts are eligible
Locations as defined in chapter 40A, section 1A. And then period. One correction is up top. It's chapter 40A, section 3A.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll take a motion for this, then we're going to discuss it.
I'll make that motion that's on the screen.
Okay, I bet Sue Philbrick wants to second it. He does, okay. After all the hard work of Sue and Chris, we want to, okay, great, we have a motion on the floor. And what I'd like to do is, I guess I'll take some brief public comment, and then I'm going to ask each board member if they have anything left to say, and then we will vote. So, Christine, you've had your hand up patiently. Go ahead. But I will add that this is your 6th time speaking, so please try to keep it to new material. Christine, you're on mute.
Sorry. So this has to do with Sarah's presentation on the financial analysis, and I had a question and I needed some clarification. So Sarah said we don't know what could be built up at the LCD. So when you look at the LCD and the use chart, housing is not allowed in the LCD. So the only thing at this point would be housing under this CHOD, and it can't be age restricted. So I'm confused on why we're saying that this could be senior housing, and we don't know what it could be, if in fact we do know that it couldn't be senior housing under this bylaw.
No, I think that the law, you can't require senior housing, but a developer can come in and choose to put in senior housing there instead of family-friendly housing. There's nothing in the law that requires them to actually build family-friendly housing.
If I can just add, we could have
I beg to
a
differ.
10, I think you could, if you think about the Junction over in Essex, or Sawmill Circle or something, the Junction over in Essex, which is 10 townhouses that are high-end. That could be built there. So I think that's an example of we don't know what's going to be built there. The full build-out or
It can't
something.
be age restricted, so it
But-
can't be senior housing, it can't be age restricted. It cannot-
So we don't know what could be built there.
I need to correct it. The law is confusing if you read the language in the law, but the guidelines make it clear that EOA, HLC, whatever they are, the alphabet agency, they will find a zoning ordinance to be in compliance as long as it does not require age-restricted housing.
So you're gonna call it age restricted, but a 40-year-old could
No.
live there?
You don't,
Doesn't make any sense, Chris.
But can I just clarify
Sorry.
your larger point, or Sarah's point, which is we don't know what's going to be built in the Beaver Dam.
There's no housing
It could-
allowed there. The only housing that's gonna be allowed there is under this bylaw,
Right,
which is.
100
family-friendly
units
housing.
or 10 units that are condos, some or zero. some-
This bylaw is silent as to age.
and to number. It doesn't require a full build out. That's my point. Okay, go ahead. Another.
Could we ask town council? Because I mean, I think it falls back to if the Milton case says the guidelines aren't admissible or whatever you want to say, if we have to zone based on the law, does the law say you cannot have age restriction? When it says it shall be without age restriction and it shall,
it's the ordinance that's without age restriction.
Yeah.
Zoning can't.
Our zoning doesn't require or allow, doesn't require that it be age restricted, that it be senior housing in any way. That's what's not allowed, is that the zoning be restrictive. So our zoning is unrestricted, but as a property owner, wanted to place a restriction on your property and make it that way.
So 3A specifically says, provided however that such multifamily housing shall be without age restriction. So it's in the law, so regardless of how the SJC comes out on the Milton case in regards to the guidelines, it's still a statutory requirement.
so that it shall be without age
But
restriction.
does it say it can't be developed without age restriction, or is that just the zoning?
Just the
No.
zoning.
Restriction.
The zoning, it just says that shall be without age restriction. So
So that's talking about zoning, not the actual building, right?
it's an open question.
Okay.
So it's an open question, because that's just like saying that you can only build a single family, and then the bylaw says that, and then you come in and build a two-family because,
That's
that was
different.
just why is that?
Okay, let's continue to take, Sandy Rogers has a comment.
Hi, thanks. I have a question regarding how many of the properties that are in all of the districts that can be built over 4 units. So if you take the existing property lines, how many of those properties can be built to 5 units or more?
Yeah, the only way would be to go through the model and look at each individual property and how the model determines what could be done on each of the property within each of the districts. So I don't have that information.
But we can say, Sandy, that to create 5 units, you need to have a minimum of 10,000 square foot lot.
And not be in a
So it's about
area
a
where
quarter
it's
of an
capped.
acre.
This should have been looked at. You should know this by the back of your hand, because we can only mandate affordable housing to be for properties that can be built 5 or more. Anything under that, we're going to go way over our ratio. So we should know that number.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Anybody else? I'm not seeing anybody else with comments, so therefore I'm going to invite the board members if people would like to speak. We have a motion on the table. I don't think I need to put it back up. We recommend passage of article to amend zoning and add section 9.4 and amend section 2 definitions and the associated amendments to the zoning maps in compliance with 40A, section 3A. The board finds the community housing overlay districts are eligible locations as defined in chapter 40A, section 1A. Okay, so Chris, do you want to say anything?
I just want to say that there are 3 members of the task force besides me here. Oh, 4, because Sue's here also. Sorry, Sue. We have been working long and hard on trying to put this together and have spent a lot of time in community meetings, asking people for comments, responding to questions, and changing the language of the zoning bylaw and the requirements as a result of public input. And I think we finally arrived at a place, a sweet spot, where we're complying with the state law and addressing concerns as best we can to get there. There are probably a lot of other solutions to this, but I think each of them is going to have its own set of difficulties and problems, and we'll be back arguing about school kids and everything else. So I think this is probably the best we can do right now. It can be changed. It's not set in stone. We go to town meeting and we vote on it. If we decide we don't like it after a couple of months or a couple of years, we go back and change it.
Great, thank you. Mary, would you like to? What?
What's the question?
Question, we'd like to speak to the motion, on the motion.
I'm a no, and this is why I think, especially at this point with the Milton case being undecided, a lot of unknowns, just our most recent with what does the actual law say with regards to shall be without age restrictions. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of room for error. I appreciate the task force taking the time. They had many meetings. Unfortunately, I think it was a flawed process. I think we should have done the financial impact analysis the first step and then drawn conclusions from that and proceeded forward for the past 18 months or whatever it has been. I think we're trying to back into a solution that is going to ultimately not be good for the town. I think there will be development. I think the propensity for change report, the consultant didn't have a lot of the data that there's parcels of land sitting, waiting to be developed that would highly have increased that number. I think people are grabbing on to that 34 units, which is false. So I think that we as a board have not done our due diligence with having in one place all the water and sewer number capacities, all the financial numbers, the impact to schools, etc. If we can't answer that simple question of how many lots could build 5 units or less, we haven't done our job. And I know I ask a lot of questions and people get very irritated with that. I think if I had documents and answers, I wouldn't need to ask so many questions. I've been at this for a long time and I'm vastly confused. The grant data changes every day. There's lots of reports out there that don't match. I try to help residents to understand and it's very confusing. So again, I don't think as a board we've done our job, and for that reason and for the impact to the town, town character, traffic, density, tax increases. I don't know.
Laura?
I am supportive of the work done by the task force and the FinCom. I think the members of both boards are appointed or elected because they have the expertise, or they, certainly the FinCom has been methodical, transparent, has, the reasoning that they use is transparent, and I think it's not just a matter of people spending time on it and working hard on it, it's really expertise and understanding the subject matter and illustrating in a way that is defensible and transparent. So I also think that that the town continues to develop whether or not we make this zoning change. Single-family housing brings change to the town as well. And I think that this is a good thing for the town to be thinking about how to make some more choices in housing and develop responsibly and slowly and make these kinds of things possible. So I am supportive of putting this on the warrant.
Okay. And Gordon or Peter, you jumped right in.
I'd like to talk, actually. So I'm one of the new kids on the block here, but I've had the opportunity to see the task force prepare the documents and gone through some of the editing process myself. And I'm methodical by nature, so what I do is I mirror much of what Laura just said. Listen to the task force, go through this process, analyze, edit, change, respond to comments, continue to edit, and all the basis and all the protections, all those things that you mentioned right away in the beginning, the goals of what the study is intended to do. I think they've met those goals. It does protect the town, and having been in the real estate development business for a long time from a design and construction end of it. I do think a 20-year period time that you suggested, Sarah, is not unrealistic, particularly how the study has really been curated to define those areas, many of which probably have no chance of development because they already are developed. They're already maxed out to what they are. There's a few opportunities, but I still waited for the propensity for the development test and the financial stuff that you just did, and the propensity for development of a 34 units. So whether it's 34 units or whether it's 54 units or whether frankly it's 75 units over a length of time which will be given to development here, I think it's still a very minor amount. And I forget what you just said, Laura, over time, this town is going to develop a lot more than just those particular areas that we talked about. I think that is true. I read your financial report when I got it. I looked at my phone and went, "Oh my God!" But it seems like it's based on, it's predicated. Everything is predicated on some basis that has real solid basis. I happen to be on the school building committee for Essex, and we've gone through the school numbers. We know exactly what much of our MSBA filings have. The school building authority is based on those school things. So I understand exactly where the population is going and how it's dropping down, where those money come, where the choice comes from. And the idea of $350 per square foot for building a living unit is very much in line, because having been in the building business, I just did a little building 3 or 4 years ago, and it's gone up significantly since then. So I'm well aware of it. So I thought everything you did and results that you came up with were well-founded. And having worked with Greg or known Greg for pretty much all the years he's been here, I have no doubt that the grant numbers are correct, and the grants looking forward is correct as well. And to sum it all up, I think I recommend this be moving forward completely.
Thank you. Peter?
And, thank you. Not too much different from Gordon, because I'm new as well. I came in here late to the game. I've been here for 5 months, and as a resident of Manchester for 32 years, and paying attention during that time, I was overwhelmed and impressed with the level of detail that went into this work. The task force, Sarah, your FinCom's study, I think I agree with Gordon as well. It's very thorough. I've done a lot of projections and budgets over my career, and you have to make assumptions. And I think your assumptions are based on very reasonable data and informed by Greg, who's been here for a long time and is the authority on grants, which I think is a big piece of your assumption. Overall, I think that hearing those school numbers, I was unaware of that, frankly, and that's surprising. And we have a really great school system that is not at capacity for students. And I think that if this plan results in more families being able to afford our town and fill up some of those spots at the school at really not significant cost to us as residents, I think that's a really great thing. And I think there's been a lot of talk throughout this entire process about structuring this so there's not too much development. And while I totally agree with that, as you said, Gordon, if it's 34 units, if it's 75 units, I still think that that's not a terrible thing for our town. And demonstrated by FinCom and the task force, we have the capacity to support that type of growth in this town. So I would support recommending this.
All right, I'm going to leave Sue. I sort of let the task force bookend this comment. So let Sue close it out. But before that, I wanted to say 3 quick things. One is thank you so much to the task force, to our consultants, to Jonathan, to Greg. Everybody has done a tremendous amount of work. And as I said the other day, Ron Master Giacomo will be very proud of us. And thank you also to Mark, who has pulled it out of the fire a couple of times here for us. And I don't want to focus too much just on tonight's work, but I do want to point out that our volunteers on the FinCom, I think, did an excellent job, and it's an example of, it's hard. We had a consultant do the propensity change study, and we don't like the consultant's report, but then we have the internal people who know the town do something, and you can find fault with that. So, it's an incomplete science, imperfect science. We have the best data we can get. We can find fault, I'm sure, on all of us can find fault on small little things on that last bit of data. But I think, to Chris's point, we've done a good job the team has done a good job putting forward a plan that meets the law. And I just wanted to also say, this is the law, and the guidance document says MBTA communities cannot avoid their obligations under the law by foregoing funding, nor does the law provide any mechanism by which a town or city may opt out of the requirement. And so I think we're a town that complies with laws, and like them or not, sometimes I speed, but the law is still that I have to go 20 and down Fine Street, and if I get stopped, okay, my ticket, or go to jail, or whatever happens to me. So I'll stop there. Sue, thoughts?
Well, you just ended with what I was going to begin with.
Oh, sorry.
The numbers are one thing. We can go through the grants and the details and the financial impact on the town and dispute the numbers. But whatever the numbers are, this law is going nowhere. And the law applies to our town. And that might be a little simplistic, but I think it's a really important thing to remember. And it's what I try to have as part of our task force discussions. The task force had a variety of views on the whether the law was welcomed or not. And, like most state laws in every state, it's not the best drafted law. Does it accomplish what the legislature wanted? I don't know. But it's a law that applies to us. And we took it, and I have to say, the public showing up at our forums and our meetings and our hearings, they had a huge role in how these 4 districts ended up being crafted. And most of the people who showed up, the majority, not all, But especially in the beginning, the majority really did not like this law and wanted the town to just turn our backs on it. But we didn't. We worked through it and we listened to the comments and we incorporated as much as we possibly could. And I think what we've crafted is so tight and does apply very uniquely to our town. And I would hate to see us not following the law have a much more dire effect on our town. And, of course, the financial impact is one thing, but there could be legal ramifications, and we shouldn't be spending our money, the town's money, on legal fees, fighting a law that some in our town don't like. So anyway, I'm proud of the work the task force did, particularly in the beginning with those like Richard and Sarah and Ann, who are so good at figuring out the details of the data. And it's complicated, but I think it's a terrific result. And I don't believe getting down into parcel by parcel. I haven't looked at every parcel in town that's in the districts and looked at their acreage, but I've looked at about 3/4 of them. And I think it's just a really tight, well-crafted answer for Manchester to comply with the law. And I fully support it.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'm going to take that as, I think we just all voted.
That's your vote.
I think, does anybody, I have a 6-1 vote. Does anybody, have I mischaracterized that? I think everybody just spoke to their vote. Thank you, everybody. I will take a motion to adjourn.
I guess I'll move that too.
And I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
And thank you, Emily and Jonathan, for being with us tonight. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody who